back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Look, he is at risk of doing this every single time, every play. Like, it can be something as simple as somebody steps on his foot, or like if he has to move 3 feet in the pocket and somebody just happens to roll on. Like, the chances are he's going to do this again at some point this year. And so this is not a, hey, does it just affect him this week? This is like, they're going to deal with this the rest of the season.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Browns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today. He'll be back in with us tomorrow. That voice you just heard was Gabe DeArmond talking about Brady Cook. He also said, I think you'd have to cut Brady Cook's leg for him not to play this weekend against Alabama. That is not what the report was yesterday from ESPN.com, though. Pete Thamel of ESPN.com is reporting that, quote, quarterback Brady Cook is considered doubtful for the game against Alabama because of his ankle injury. He adds, he has been extremely limited in practice so far this week. He still might try to ramp up later in the week to attempt to play, but, quote, the outlook is pessimistic, end quote. T-Bone, I think this is all nonsense.
Oh.
Just complete and total nonsense.
So I shouldn't panic.
Let's break this down, right? Brady Cook has been extremely limited in practice so far this week. Well, of course. He has a high ankle sprain. I would assume he's going to take exactly 0 snaps at practice this week. There's no reason to risk it. As Gabe DeArmond just said in that return, every time he drops back, every time he takes a step on a football field, he is at risk of re-aggravating this injury. High ankle sprains are notoriously finicky. These things are 6 to 8 week types of injuries. Like, Brady Cook probably will not be at 100% the entire rest of the regular season. There will be no point at which he feels like he is good with his ankle. I remember when Patrick Mahomes had this during the postseason a couple of years ago. That dude spent 2 weeks on the bye week before the Super Bowl. Literally every second of the day that he had available to him, he was rehabbing his ankle. And then he gets into the Super Bowl, and guess what? Re-aggravates it in the Super Bowl after 2 weeks of rehab, of spending the entire time not doing a damn thing on his ankle. Felt good, felt better than he had at any point in the previous few weeks. It didn't matter because this thing can be re-injured at any point in time. That being said, I think he's going to play. I'd be shocked if he doesn't start. I don't know if he'll finish. I don't know what they gave him on Saturday. That dude did not feel like he had ankles. Forget feeling pain. He felt like he was running on air by the time that he got back onto that football field. And I think that's how he's probably going to start the game on Saturday. I do not know what that's like. He gets into that locker room for halftime. Once you stop moving on it, dude, good luck. That thing's going to swell up like a balloon. I have no idea how he's going to be able to finish the game. But start it, I expect him to start.
At halftime, Brady Cook's going to do like the Russell Wilson on the airplane, high knees, keep that ankle moving. That way it doesn't tighten up on him and it gets worse. But yeah, I think you're right. I expect him to play in this one. And honestly, he's still their best option, even with one leg. Yeah. I saw that. What's his name? Drew Pine. Is that who they're back?
Forgettable much.
Yeah,
yes.
That was bad against Auburn. But yeah, look, it's not an ideal situation going on the road to Tuscaloosa, going against Alabama, who I don't think is a very good Alabama football team compared to the Nick Saban era. But I expect him to play. I think it's just gamesmanship right now from Eli Drinkwitz, and it's smart. Limit what the media can see from practice, so there is no reports of, oh, he's not doing anything. That way you kind of limit, okay, nobody panic. You're just not going to see him at all, and he's probably, to your point, he's not moving at all at practice right now. He's not taking any snap because this is such a injury that can get worse than just a snap of a finger. I think he plays. I don't know if you see him finish that game at Alabama. It would be a tough ask to do that, and now you put a ton of pressure on your offensive line to make sure that you keep Brady Cook protected, and also Eli Drinkwitz and the play calling that they're going to have to do, and Kirby Moore play calling, of, hey, we got to get the ball out fast, and that's what they're going to have to do this weekend with him being limited for this game against Alabama.
BK, prior to last Saturday, we had only seen Drew Pine in mop-up duty, and in that first half versus Auburn, you pretty much witnessed everything you needed to see. Tanner, you just mentioned trying to get the ball out quickly, regardless of the individual under center. Well, Pine did that to the grand total of 3.7 yards per attempt. Could not stretch the field, could not apparently also execute the better part of the playbook there. There is no other choice here. As you stated, Cook is not only starting this game, he's going until he simply can't go anymore, because he is, for all intents and purposes, your only shot of competing in this environment. Now, fortunately, for Missouri fans, for people out there maybe looking for a glimmer of hope, this isn't your father's or even your older brother's Alabama defense. At the same time, I also think the interior of this D, you can run on it, but there's your problem as well. Your quandary is that you don't even have your number one running back in Nate Noel. Can Carroll give that to you up the gut? There are major concerns.
Yeah, of course. Like, you're a 16-point underdog in this game for a reason. Yeah. Alabama's the better team. They should be expected to win. I'm not going to take that because I don't know what to expect out of Brady Cook, but I mean, the odds are stacked against them. I just think that this report about Brady Cook is just complete and utter nonsense. I think this is a reporter, and I think Pete Thamel does a pretty good job, generally speaking, but I think he's doing Drinkwitz's dirty work here. I think that's what's happening. I think Drinkwitz got played by Texas A&M. He, I believe, prepared for the wrong quarterback going into that game. Genuinely believe, nobody can convince me otherwise. I think Missouri was prepared for their backup.
You told me the backup was going to play. I was like, oh, Missouri should probably win that one.
Everybody thought he was. Drinkwitz said publicly, we're preparing for the backup. It's quote-unquote semantics, the way that the Texas A&M was putting together their depth chart that week. I think they were preparing for their backup and were shocked when Connor Weigman took the field, and I don't think they ever adjusted to what Connor Weigman was bringing to the table. And I think he's trying to do the same thing to Alabama, because it's two very different offenses. If Brady Cook is out there, I mean, you saw it on the first play that Brady Cook came back onto the field. Deep shot down the left sideline to Luther Burden. It didn't connect because none of their deep passes connect, but he tried it. And that's something that Drew Pine was never going to be willing or able to do. So if Drew Pine's out there, dude, bring everybody to the line of scrimmage. If Brady Cook is out there, it's a very different game plan for Mizzou, and it should be a very different game plan for Alabama. What this makes Alabama do is prepare for two different quarterbacks and split their time this week at meetings. If nothing else, it gives you a little bit of an advantage. So that's what I think this report is out there for. I don't think that Brady Cook will miss this game. I don't know that he will finish it either, but I would be shocked if he doesn't start the game for Mizzou on Saturday. This gets us to the follow-up question, though, T-Bone. It's something that we've been thinking about off-air all week long. Your Illini and my Missouri Tigers both have one loss so far on this season. Your Illini are traveling to Oregon this weekend as a 21.5-point underdog to take on the Ducks. My Tigers are going to Alabama this weekend as a 16.5-point underdog to take on what is not the same Alabama team as we've come to know and appreciate. If either of them lose this weekend, I think their chances of a college football playoff are done, basically. They'll both have two losses. I'm not sure they're going to be able to have the quality of wins that is necessary to exceed the other two lost teams that are likely to be there at the end of the year. Is it a college football playoff or bust season this year for Mizzou and or Illinois?
I think that's two different answers, because I think for Missouri, even though, I mean, we just talked about it, things are not going their way with how they are going into this Alabama game. It's still a college football playoff or bust season for Eli Drinkwitz and the Tigers. They don't make the college football playoff, the season was not a success. And that's just how it ended up being this year, because we're trying to build momentum off of what was a great season last year, a win in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. Come into this year, you bring back your same starting quarterback. You still got one of the best wide receivers in the country. And though you had to make some adjustments on defense and a couple adjustments with the running game, bringing in new running backs, for Eli Drinkwitz, it was playoff or bust. This was the season for the Missouri Tigers. They missed, the season's not a success. I don't feel that way about Illinois. And don't get me wrong, I'd love to see them in the college football playoff. I think odds are they're going to end up with at least a loss against Oregon and maybe one more on their schedule and finish 9-3. That's a success for the Fighting Illini. The fact that they have had back-to-back games in that kind of primetime afternoon slot on CBS, and both going against top 25 teams, Michigan, now on the road at Oregon. They played Penn State on the road tight. They've got 3 top 25 wins if you're looking at what the AP poll were in that week. This has already been a success for Brett Bielema because his squad had no expectations. I thought they were a 5-win team coming into the year, and here they are at 6-1 and can potentially finish this season in the top 25.
It has been a resounding success. Even if you go to Eugene and you actually get the doors blown off by Oregon in that setting, well, hey, it's a possibility. It's a possibility. Dylan Gabriel, you never know. Even if that were to come to fruition, Illinois has totally overachieved to this point and played truly great football, and not many would have expected in in that realm of the Big Ten. Whereas BK, you know it. The Tigers enthusiasts, people surrounding the program, you can say what you want about creating and cultivating that 1-0 mindset week in and week out. This team was bound for the college football playoff. Everything, the arrow pointing up, the swan song of Cook and Burden in all likelihood there on campus. You had so many different upperclassmen returning. Your eyes were set distinctly on that one goal. It is college football playoff or bust, and there's no way in terms of the volume of opponents, the quality of opponents you have left. Even if you're in this game versus Bama, even if you're into it well into the second half, I simply think you have to come out with a W because, in retrospect, that loss to A&M, such a killer insofar as you were non-competitive. It wasn't even a game, so there is no margin for error here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree on whether or not they can lose this game to get into the college football playoff. The answer is no, but is it a college football playoff or bust season at this point? I think my expectations have changed now. Brady Cook has a high ankle sprain. He's not going to be the same quarterback that he was prior to the high ankle sprain, and he wasn't a great quarterback prior to the high ankle sprain. Things have not come together for Missouri the way that I expected this season. Was it coming into the season, my expectation was you need to make the college football playoff. This is your all-in season. And to their credit, they did everything that they could in the offseason to make this team as good as possible to get to the college football playoff. The cornerback position hasn't come together the way that they expected. The offensive line hasn't come together the way that they expected. They added bodies. Those bodies haven't been as good as they thought they were going to be for the most part. At this point, is it college football playoff or bust? I don't think so. If you win 10 games, I don't think it's a failure if you end up missing out on the college football playoff this year. Disappointing, definitely. I do not think it is a failure, though. And so that's where I think maybe there's some semantics that are going on here. But like if Missouri loses on Saturday, wins out the rest of the way, gets to 10 wins, they will have one of their 6 or 7 best seasons in program history. It's really hard for me to call that a complete failure. It's disappointing relative to what we were all hoping for prior to the start of the regular season. But I don't think it's a failure, man, especially if they go out there, play competitive football this weekend, and end up losing by a touchdown. You know, that to me is not a complete failure of a season. Successful year, just disappointing relative to what the absolute pinnacle of the expectations were.
See, and I would agree with that because, like, the injury to Cook does make this harder in Alabama. I would agree with that if expectations had changed before the A&M game. But you lay an egg at A&M when you had a completely healthy roster for the most part. That game is a failure.
I don't think that makes your season a failure, though.
Because it sets you up to where you now have to win, and you lost your mulligan, essentially, because you lost that game, and we all thought going into it they were the better football team.
I don't feel that way anymore, though, after watching Texas A&M more.
I think when you look back on it now, now that you lost your mulligan in that game at College Station, you could have had a mulligan this week with Alabama if you don't lose that game, right? And you don't look on it now and say, oh, well, Brady Cook's hurt. Now you're probably not a playoff team. No, you just find a way to get through it, and then you try and win out past this. To me, the expectations don't change because of the injuries. It's because they had those expectations, A&M. They laid an egg. So for me, it's still a failure of a season. I get what you're saying. 10 wins, one of the best in program history. I also got to add in the caveat, it's a 12-team playoff now. So now things get judged a little bit differently from a 10-win season from, 5 years ago. So for me, it would be a failure if they missed the playoff.
I don't think that's fair. I think 10 wins is 10 wins. What's changed is what 10 wins gets you now compared to what it got you 5, 7, 10, 60 years ago, Like, I don't think when we went to a 4-team playoff, that changed the quality or the value of winning 11 games, right? It just meant, hey, 11 games can potentially now get you into the college football playoff, the 4-team version of that. But I don't know, maybe somebody on the text line said, BK had spoken like a true loser. Maybe. I find value in my team winning 10 games.
Harsh.
I know that's rare nowadays, is like, if you don't make it to the absolute pinnacle of whatever your sport is, then the season has to be deemed a failure. I don't view it that way as a fan. We did get this from Willie as well in the YouTube chat. YouTube.com/101ESPNSTL is the way that you can get involved in the chat. Said, so then what would you consider a disappointing season for Mizzou to be, BK? I think 9 wins. If you win 9 or fewer games, that's disappointing to me. 10 wins, I still think is considered a success. 8 wins would be an absolute failure. But I think 9 wins is where you get to the threshold of, man, that's not what we were expecting this season. And especially now that you see what the quality is of the teams that are on your schedule, I think 9 wins is where you get to that threshold. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex is out today. He'll be back in with us tomorrow. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll talk to Joey Vitale, Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and, of course, Bally Sports Midwest. Want to get his thoughts on the Robert Thomas injury. Who needs to step up in his absence? Obviously, Braden Shin is literally going to be picked up to the top line in his absence. But how can the Blues stay afloat while they are without their number one center? We'll talk to Joey Vitale about that coming up at 11:30. But next, there's an interesting ranking, T-Bone, of the top hitters in the World Series. We're going to put together our list of the top hitters. And are you rooting for Jack Flaherty in this World Series to come out victorious? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
St. Louis Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with the First Community pre- and post-game show.
First Community Credit Union, calling St. Louis home for 90 years and powered by Scott Lee Heating Company.
Right now, 38.
The 101 Reward Center is always loaded up with awesome giveaways. And right now, we have your chance to win a tailor-made golf bag.
Nice.
Get entered to win that sleek, tailor-made golf bag right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. In 10 minutes, we'll talk to Joey Vitale, Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and the FanDuel Sports Network. Not Bally Sports Midwest anymore. I gotta get used to that one.
Adjusting to that.
It's still very early on. All right, so the World Series begins tomorrow night. Game 1 will be heard right here on your home of the World Series programming. 101 ESPN, of course, pregame coverage for that one starting at 6 o'clock. T-Bone, I'm amped up for this. I can't remember many World Series matchups that I've been more excited for. We went through this the other day. The number of future Hall of Famers that are in this, MVPs that are in this. You've got a couple of Cy Young winners that are in this. It's about as good as it gets. Two of the most historically successful franchises. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. They were breaking this thing down every possible way, and they mentioned, hey, sometimes you do need the hero or the villains to go and have success, so then you can have them going into next year as the teams that everybody can measure themselves against. When you have teams every year like the Diamondbacks or the Nationals that are just kind of, wait, where did this come from? It makes it more difficult to really judge yourself relative to the best of the best, right? So I enjoy every once in a while having this kind of a matchup where the Goliaths are truly going up against one another. That being said, I was reading a piece today that broke down the top hitters that will participate in this World Series. And I got through the first 5 names And I was like, oh, so those are the 5 best hitters in Major League Baseball. So I wanted to do this with you. We can go kind of one by one to see how we compare with this. How would you rank, T-Bone, the top hitters in this year's World Series? Who do you have at number 1 on your list? I'm curious.
Number 1 for me is Juan Soto.
Interesting. We switched those. I'm guessing you have 2 is Shohei?
Yeah, I got
Ohtani
at 2.
I have 1 is Shohei and 2 is Soto. Why do you have Soto at the top?
I've got Soto at the top because I think he's got the best eye in all of baseball. I think Ohtani's got probably the best, well, maybe second best behind Stanton, pure power in this World Series. But I think for Juan Soto, he's got the best eye. He's able to draw more walks than Shohei Ohtani is. And then when he does get a pitch, he's able to kill it. And he's been on fire. He's playing a lot like the guy we saw when the Nationals went on their run back in, 2019. I think it's just the eye for me that is what separates Soto from Ohtani, but it's not like it was a big separation. Like it's barely much of one, but that's my 1-2.
To me, that was the top tier. It's Shohei and Soto. Like those 2 guys to me are going to be the 2 best hitters in this series. I think the next tier is also 2 names. It's 2 other guys that are MVP candidates every year. I had Mookie 3 and Judge 4. Going into this series. How did you rank those 2?
So I've got Mookie 3, Freddie Freeman 4.
Wow.
I think in October, Freddie Freeman's a better hitter than Aaron Judge. I think for Freddie Freeman, I know he's got a Brady Cook ankle right now, but to me, he's still one of the best hitters in baseball. He can hit for power. He can also just take the ball the other way, take his singles. He hits for average. I think Freddie Freeman is a better hitter right now than Aaron Judge is for this World Series.
I've got him 7. I just don't know what the ankle situation is, man. I know he's saying that he's fully healthy. I don't believe him. I think that's as ridiculous as the Brady Cook report today, that he's going to be out for this game against Alabama. I think Freddie will play. And he's going to do everything he possibly can to get himself back onto the field. I just cannot possibly believe that he's anywhere close to 100%.
Yeah,
and he didn't look right whenever he was hurt.
Yeah, I still think he's one of the best hitters in this series. Like, if you told me, okay, Freddie Freeman's coming to the plate, I still would be nervous.
Totally. I'm in full agreement with you there. I just think, man, every time you step up to the plate, you have risk of re-injury, and every time that you're trying to hit and you're trying to plant and you're trying to turn with that ankle, it's potentially a disaster. So I've got Mookie 3, Judge 4. I've got Freddie Freeman all the way down at 7. Again, not because I don't believe in him, but because I just don't know what to expect out of his ankle. I've got Max Muncy at 5. Who did you have? Because you have
I had Judge
Mookie,
at 5.
Freeman, and Judge as your 3, 4, 5. Who did you have at 6 then?
I had Teoscar Hernandez at 6.
Over Stanton and over Muncy.
Yeah. I don't have Muncy in my top 8.
I think you're severely underestimating Max Muncy.
I know I am, but like I also still am playing like kind of it's a tough balance because I'm also trying to balance like what I see in the regular season.
But Max Muncy in the regular season was 35% above league average offensively this year.
I have Teoscar Hernandez on my list.
15% of the time.
I have Teoscar Hernandez ahead of him. Wow. I also have, the other Dodger I have ahead of him, and this one's the one that's going to be super controversial because he hit like 8th in the championship series. I think he just gives a competitive at-bat still is Will Smith.
Okay.
I have him in my top 8. I have him at 7.
So give me your list real quick.
Okay, so Soto 1, Ohtani 2, Betts 3, Freeman 4, Judge 5, Teoscar Hernandez 6. I have Will Smith 7, Giancarlo Stanton 8.
Interesting. I've got Shohei 1, Soto 2, Mookie 3, Judge 4. Max Muncy is 5th on my list. I've got Stanton 6, Freddie Freeman 7. And I think the series will very likely be determined by who ends up being the 8th best hitter in the series. Because I think there are so many different candidates for it, and I think all of them are potential X factors. Talking about Teoscar Hernandez, Will Smith. Austin Wells was really good in the DS. He didn't have many moments in the CS. Gleyber Torres was really good in the ALCS. We have not really seen so far big moments from Jazz Chisholm. And he's somebody that just kind of gets forgotten, but he's a very good player, and I think he's the kind of player that could show up in a big moment in the World Series. He's another one that I would throw into this mix. Gavin Lux is somebody else that I don't think you should be sleeping on completely. Kike Hernandez is somebody who comes up big in every October. He has some of the biggest splits between regular season numbers and postseason numbers. I have not mentioned Tommy Edman, who has come up huge and just won NLCS MVP. To me, I know the stars are all going to show out. I expect a lot out of all of them. I think there's a really good chance that this series is flipped by whoever finishes the series as the 8th best hitter. I know that sounds crazy. I think there's a pretty good chance of that because the top 7 are so established in my mind.
Yeah, I think this series is going to be determined by whoever's, and this is a weird thing to say, 7, 8, 9 hitters end up performing better. Because what happens if those guys get on base? Like if you're looking at the Yankees lineup from their last game against Cleveland, that we're talking about Anthony Volpe, Austin Wells, Alex Verdugo. Why do I bring up those guys? Because if those guys get on and you flip the order back up to the top,
100%.
Look, you're not going to be able to stop a Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton.
That's what happened to the Dodgers in the last series. The bottom of the order got walks and then took a walk, and then they ended up at the top of the order. Dude, good luck. Okay, so now I've got to deal with Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts. What am I supposed to do here? Imagine being that guy that comes in at the bottom of the order for the wraparound as a reliever. It's an absolute nightmare, a nightmare scenario for you.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's where this series is determined, because now you got to avoid that, okay, well, now we're wrapping back around to the top of the order. There's runners on, and to your point, that's exactly what the issue was for the Mets. Now, they were also walking the world, which helped lead to that, but I think that's where it's at. Now, you're not going to be able to stop those guys, but if you want them to do damage, you don't want a Ohtani bomb to be a 3-run shot because you allowed 7, 8, 9 to get on base. You want it to be a solo shot, limit the damage.
It definitely pivots in that regard, and that's actually why I like LA and specifically the other Hernandez we didn't reference at first, because we know what he is able to do in October. We know how lethal he was in the previous series as well. And when you're talking about 2 extraordinarily deep lineups, the degree to which LA now can lengthen its order even more, whether Tommy Edman is hitting 4th or not, you've got Kike Hernandez then backing up the heavy bats, and I think that it will hinge on whether he can at all replicate what he did in the NLCS for that matter too. The guy's got 15 career postseason homers in October. It's nuts.
From the 314, and this is one of like 10 different texts that say something along these lines. Guys, I can't believe that neither of you had Tommy Edman listed in the top 8. I can't believe somebody else from the 573, you guys didn't have him in the top 3.
Whoa.
I think that what we are now remembering or realizing is just how loaded these lineups are, dude. That's part of what makes this series so special. You look at the top, especially 5 hitters, if you include Freddie Freeman in this. I mean, they're all Hall of Famers and like inner circle Hall of Famer types. Shohei, Soto, Judge, Mookie, Freeman. Those are 5 of the best players of this era. Forget just of this year, of this era. And they're all participating in this World Series. If you wanted to put any of those 5, and yes, I'm serious about including Freddie Freeman on this, T-Bone. I think you're right. He's one of the best hitters in the world. If you wanted to put any of them at number 1 in this series, sure. Somebody else on the text line said, guys, Judge was the best hitter in the world this year. Absolutely. He has not been the best hitter in the world in October. Shohei and Soto have been. And those guys take their game to another level. You want to have any of those 3 number 1, I'm fine with it. Mookie number 1, I'm fine with it. You want to put Freddie Freeman up there in the top 3, cool. This series has everything you could ask for when it comes to the hitting, and ultimately it will be judged by what does the pitching do. I don't trust either of these rotations.
I was going to say, come up with a top 8 list of the best pitchers in this series.
I think
there's names.
6 of them would be relievers.
Probably. I was going to say most of it is names, but like some of them, like everybody originally when you say that would go, oh, well, Yamamoto's on that list. Yeah, but Yamamoto's like a 4-inning starter at this point. Not Cardinals, I wish. Dodgers, they're going with bullpen games. So, yeah, you're right. It probably is mostly relievers of how do they neutralize guys.
Somebody on the text line said, BK, can you please explain to me how Mookie Betts is a better hitter than Aaron Judge? Sure. I think he has fewer holes in his swing. I think he makes more contact. I think he is a guy that scares me more than when he comes up to the plate at this point in the regular series, in the postseason. When you get to postseason baseball, one of the things that I think goes a little underrated is that every single person within that organization, especially at this point in the year when you're into the World Series and there is no advanced scouting taking place anymore, every single person in your entire organization is focused on that team. How do I get that guy out? And so there is a specific individualized plan for every single player. And Mookie Betts, to me, just has fewer holes, man. He gets on base at an unbelievably high clip. He hits for doubles. He hits singles. I know Judge is a really excellent hitter, and it wouldn't surprise me if he wins MVP in this World Series. We're talking about like degrees of greatness, all-time greatness between these two. And so for me, I would rather have Mookie Betts. It's by the slightest of margins, the slimmest of margins, but I would rather have Mookie Betts, personally, as a hitter. He's Tanner. That is Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. World Series begins tomorrow night right here on 101 ESPN, but tonight is the Blues versus the Maple Leafs, and Joey Vitale is going to be on the call for your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. He joins us to break this thing down and to discuss how the Blues overcome the injury for Robert Thomas next year on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN's Blues Fan of the Week.
Congratulations to Kevin Nettesheim of Fenton, Missouri. You are this week's 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now to be the next 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week and take home a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Learn more at 101ESPN.com. Start your mornings with the opening drive on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Brooke Grimsley, Dan McLaughlin, and Randy Carricker. The opening drive, weekday mornings from 7 to 10 on 101 ESPN.
The opening drive is presented by Sumner One.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Thomasless Blues collide with Leafs. Good morning. I'm Bradford Bruns, and your Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight on 101 ESPN, St. Louis visits scenic Ontario, sans Robert Thomas. The All-Star forward fractured his right ankle in Tuesday's 3-2 loss to Winnipeg. Oscar Sundqvist, meanwhile, has been activated from injured reserve. STL Toronto puck drop set for 6 p.m. 1 hour later, NFL Week 8 action ignites. Matthew Stafford's Rams host Minnesota, which could feature tight end TJ Hawkinson once again. More dire developments regarding Mizzou, Brady Cook, plus Nate Noel among those listed as doubtful versus Alabama. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline as Joey Vitale joins us here on the show. Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and FanDuel Sports Network. He joins us each and every Thursday here on BK and Ferrario. Alex out today. He's going to be back in for the pregame show tonight at 5 o'clock right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Joey, appreciate the time as always, my man. How you doing today?
Joey.
Alex, how are we still doing?
Man, that was weak sauce, boys. That was weak
I'm sorry,
sauce.
Joe.
That was weak sauce. I guess Alex is the one really carrying the load on the old chanting, but we'll work on that.
We'll get it better. Joe, we got to start with the obvious here. Not great news earlier this week. A fractured ankle for Robert Thomas. He's going to be out for at least the next 6 weeks when they reevaluate that thing. As a former player, you've been in teams, I would imagine, that lose one of your best players. How do you overcome something like this? How do you stay afloat while Robert Thomas is out? We'll see if we can get Joey back on the line here, try to get a better connection with him.
Can I get a second chance?
I need to criticize both of you. You got to be better than that.
I know. I
need a better effort out of both of you than what we just heard there in the open with Joey. All right, I need you to lock in the rest of the day.
True. I will readily accept responsibility.
Let's see. If Joey, you're back, my friend.
Joey. Awesome.
So I was there the whole time. I just wanted you guys to give me a new chance.
There we go. Okay,
perfect.
there we go.
How was that better though, Joe?
No, that was 100% better, and I will now respond to your question, BK, because I just wasn't feeling it at the beginning. But yeah, BK, it's clearly the obvious big and bad news for St. Louis. You lose one of your best players, if not your best player, the face of the franchise for a very, very long time. This isn't a couple-week ding up. This is a reevaluated after 6 weeks, and you never love that term. Going to be reevaluated in 6 weeks, because it goes to show you that it's 6 weeks at a very minimum. So when it happened, I remember talking about it in the postgame with Alex. Because he actually played a couple shifts after that. That actually always makes me a little nervous. It's almost the opposite of what you would think. If it's really bad, you think, oh my God, there's no way for him to skate anymore. But with these broken bones, it's almost the opposite. Sometimes these ligament sprains, you really just can't go immediately. The broken bones, you actually feel like I might be okay. You try it out, and then you say, oh no, something's really wrong. So the pain up front on a broken bone doesn't feel as bad. So that's what made me a little nervous when Robert Thomas played a couple more shifts after that blocked shot. And, here's the reality. I mean, what he brings to the game. He's the face of your franchise, over a point-per-game player last season while taking on some of the opposition's best lines and best players, which is phenomenal in itself at such a young age. Face-off, special teams. Here's a kid that pretty much just does it all for you, and he's just a quiet leader who just has wonderful presence on the ice. From a team aspect, a couple things stand out. Drew Bannister already addressed it this morning. You can't replace Robert Thomas. But much like when Ryan O'Reilly got hurt a couple years ago under Craig Berube, I'll never forget what Berube said, and Drew Bannister said the exact same thing this morning. You can't replace, player for player. But what we're going to do is now we're going to dig in and we're going to demand more out of every single guy on the team. If everyone can bring an extra 5%, maybe that's possibly, from a team standpoint, what we can make up from a loss of Robert Thomas. The one scary stat that I can't help but think of this time of the year when you lose a player like Thomas is, Alex, we were breaking it down with Grant a couple weeks ago, but this crazy stat that since the wild card got implemented into this NHL back in the 13-14 season, that there is this weird thing out there that for some reason it just comes to fruition every year. Around 80% of teams that are in a playoff spot by Thanksgiving make the playoffs. So it goes to show you 8 out of 10 teams that are in a playoff spot stay in a playoff spot by the end of the year, and then every now and then there's a couple teams that sneak in. So based off that percentage, and you're looking at 6 weeks out, that's that Thanksgiving marker. So that's kind of goes to show you guys that these next 6 weeks they're actually very important when you look at the big playoff picture come April.
And Joe, I'm curious because you were a part of the Penguins in 2011, 2012 when Sidney Crosby went out, missed time due to, I believe it was concussion. When you're a player, do you end up feeling more pressure that you almost have to change your game if you end up getting elevated in the lineup because of an injury to one of your superstars?
Well, it's pressure for sure, Tanner. It is pressure, but also an opportunity. I was talking to Philip Broberg just the other day, and, we were talking about, his time in Edmonton, and his minutes were a little bit lesser in Edmonton because he's behind Bouchard and Darnell Nurse. And he just felt as if, he needed to get on a team that gave him more of that opportunity. And you look at that when you compare that to the Robert Thomas injury, for a player like, so look at Dylan Holloway, for example. He's playing on the wing on that Braden Shen line, that third line. Now he's going to get center minutes. He's going to be the center on that third line here and probably moving forward. So is it a little bit of pressure? Yes, but also it's a wonderful opportunity for young players to step up and be asked to do larger roles, power play minutes. What does that look like more for a Braden Shen, who's now probably going to be manning that top unit? Who else gets an opportunity to slide in there? So it definitely is pressure. It's definitely unfortunate. But like, Drew Bannister also said this morning, what an opportunity to find the strength of this team and to grow stronger through this next 6+ weeks without your franchise top player.
Joey Vitale, our guest for just another minute or two here on 101 ESPN. Joe, final question that I've got for you. I mentioned this the other day. I feel like the Blues this year kind of know who they are and how they need to win. They're more of a goal suppression team, at least in my opinion, than they are a team that's going to win by consistently putting up 4+ goals. And I do wonder, is that something that they can lean on during this time? Robert Thomas is obviously an excellent defensive centerman, but as a team that relies so much on structure and has been so much better defensively in their own zone this year, is that something that can at least keep them afloat until they're able to get Thomas back?
Well, I would agree with you by your assessment first, BK. And I think that the good news is when you lose a player like Thomas, you're better off finding your strength by keeping the goals out of your net than having to put them in the net. And what I mean by that is, with Robert Thomas and this team that you have, if you're a suppression team and you're looking to win games at a low value, 1-0 like we saw, last week against the New York Islanders, or 2-1 games, or 3-2 late overtime games. If that's going to be your MO, losing Thomas on a team like that when you have so much defensive depth on the forward side of things is a good thing. I mean, look at you got Radek Fox up on the fourth line. You just welcome back Oscar Sundqvist, another defensive savvy player. Look at Braden Shen, now going to be manning top 6 minutes. Again, a defending centerman. So, yes, it is a little different when you lose Thomas to a team like this versus let's look at on the flip side tonight. If an Austin Matthews were to be lost in a Toronto Maple Leafs team, that Toronto Maple Leafs team, they're not a suppression team. We're going to have to outscore our opponent team. So when you lose a star center like Matthews on the Toronto Maple Leafs, that is a much bigger hit than what the Blues have now. This can be absorbed fairly well, I think, especially when you draw Sundqvist back into the lineup, because and even Drew Bannister said this morning, you're not going to outscore the Toronto Maple Leafs. You're not going to outscore a lot of these teams on this upcoming road trip. But what you can do is you can defend better than them. And I think that, winning this game tonight, 1-0, 2-1, that's going to have to be their game plan. And over the next 6 weeks, that is really going to have to be their game plan moving forward. This is less about finding offense, and this is more about being committed to everyone defending extremely well. And like I mentioned, yes, it's unfortunate to lose Thomas, but of the personnel this team has, there are a lot of defensive, savvy, forward-thinking players on this Blues team right now, where I really do believe they can pick up the weight.
Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the game tonight. Blues versus Maple Leafs. Pre-game coverage with Alex beginning at 5 o'clock. Puck drop for that one with Joey and Curbs tonight right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN at 6. Appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the game tonight.
Thank you, boys. You guys have a great day.
Absolutely. That's Joey Vitale joining us as he does each and every Thursday here on BK and Ferrario. You'll hear him on the game tonight. You can always see him as well on the FanDuel Sports Network. A little bit of news to pass along from the Blues. Came out an hour ago. Bannister saying that Sonny, Torpo, and Perunovic will be in tonight. Thomas is obviously out. The other two that are going to be out are Bolduc and Kessel. Matt Kessel out for Perunovic. Bolduc is the one that ends up coming out of the lineup as well. So my guess, based on what we saw yesterday at morning skate, is the line combinations will be Saad, Shin, and Neighbors. Texier will be with Booch and Kyrou, Joseph with Holloway and Kapanen, and then your fourth line tonight is expected to be Sonny as one of the wings, Torpo as the other, and then Foxa centering that fourth line. Again, Kessel coming out as that third pair defenseman. Perunovic will get an opportunity tonight with P.O. Joseph. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, there was an interesting piece that came out earlier today by our guy Jim Bowden, former Major League Baseball general manager, assessing what the market is going to be this year in free agency. We don't expect the Cardinals to be big players. Can they be a player, though, on some of these individual opportunities? We'll talk about that, who they should be in on, coming up in 15 minutes. Questions and answers is next here on 101 ESPN.
The World Series is on 101 ESPN. Tomorrow night, Game 1, Dodgers and Yankees. Pre-game at 6, first pitch at 7:08. The MLB plays on 101 ESPN. picture. The real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers.
Presented by WindowWorldSt.Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Browns, I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. From the 314, guys, can you help me understand why the Blues are taking out young guys in a retool for players that are older veterans? I can't really help you out with that. The one that continues to befuddle me is Kasperi Kapanen getting as much playing time as he is. He's honestly played fine. He's played above my expectations this year. But who would I rather see get these opportunities right now? Kasperi Kapanen, who has, most likely no future here in St. Louis, or Zach Bolduc? I'd go Bolduc. To me, that's the guy that I would want playing with Holloway and Joseph tonight. And it does confuse me why they continue to do this with Kapanen, but that's their prerogative. The one that confuses me even more, though, is why are you pulling Matt Kessel out of the lineup?
True.
P.O. Joseph, I thought, had a pretty good game the other night, but if you really need to get Scott Perunovich into the lineup, that's where you put him, is right next to Kessel. So that one is really confusing to me, but both of them I don't get, personally.
Yeah, I don't get the Bolduc one. And look, Bolduc didn't have a great game in the last one against Winnipeg. But the previous, 2-3 games, he was noticeable. And he's a kid. He's going to have games where he doesn't end up playing his best hockey. He shouldn't feel like he's going to get punished if he does that. And that's why I didn't understand completely in the offseason the move of whether it be bringing in Kapanen or bringing in all the other pieces that they brought in, because it was going to always lead to an easy scenario for Drew Bannister to block Zach Bolduc when he wanted to try and get him in the lineup. And I agree with you. I don't get the Kessel one. If you really needed to get Perunovich a game, I would have just swapped him out for Joseph. They play like the same style. They're all more offensive-minded defensemen. I would want someone that's going to be defensive-minded like Matt Kessel with one of them if they are going to end up pulling him out of the lineup.
From the 980, and I want to get you in on this one, Bradford. Questions and answers. Guys, if Missouri beats Alabama, do you think they could still miss the playoff based upon the fact that Alabama is only a 15th ranked team right now, and Mizzou's strength of schedule the rest of the season is not that hard? I do not. I think if you're 11-1 in the SEC, make the college football playoff. Now, something that should be acknowledged, 11-1 in the SEC this year might get you to Atlanta. That might be good enough for Missouri to get to the SEC championship game. Then you potentially have another loss. This is the scenario that we were talking about before the season, T-Bone.
Do you want to be in the championship?
Do you actually want to play in that game? The answer is probably no. If you were Mizzou and you could say, hey, we're good. We did what we wanted to. We're actually going to go ahead and opt out of this never happened before. We're going to opt out of the SEC championship game. We would rather just be a direct admit to the college football playoff. That being said, if you win that game, you're an auto admit into the college football playoff. So you have to play in it. But yeah, I think 11-1, if for whatever reason that didn't get you into the SEC championship game, you would be in. You'd be into the college football playoff.
No, thank you to the conference championship invite, right? Now, that's assuming, of course, that Missouri doesn't somehow slip up in the month of November as well.
That's what we're saying. In the scenario that they do finish
in that scenario. So I do think you can't deny that if you finish with just the one loss on the season, and we'll see exactly how it plays out in November as far as health and all of that is concerned. But it's so topsy-turvy right now, guys. The two teams without a conference loss to this point, they are meeting this weekend, A&M and LSU, so there will be one more on the ledger for one of those two teams. It just changes week after week.
Yeah, there are currently 7 teams in the SEC with 0 or 1 loss in conference. Those teams: Texas A&M, LSU, Georgia, Tennessee, Mizzou, Texas, and of course Vanderbilt.
Yeah, with one loss, you're going to get in. There's no doubt about it. I mean, like last year, we thought, there was really 4 or 5 elite teams before Jordan Travis got hurt with Florida State. That every one-loss team would have got in. There was only 7 one-loss teams by that point at the end of the season. I think it's going to look somewhat similar to that. There's going to be 7 or 8 teams that have got 1 loss. They're all going to make the college football playoff. Really, once you get into that 2-loss territory is where it starts to get interesting.
Yeah. Retroactively, A&M doing nothing but surging right now. In the second half of the season, you expect that Elko defense to just pick up more steam.
What if A&M loses this weekend against LSU and wins out the rest of the way? They would have 1 loss in SEC play. or LSU could potentially win out the rest of the way. They've got Bama, Florida, Vandy, and Oklahoma, so they would have no losses at that point. So let's say they lose to Bama. So they end up with one loss as well. So you've got LSU, Texas A&M, both with one loss in the SEC. Could you get Georgia there with one loss in the SEC as well? Yeah, you probably could. Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Massachusetts. They've got UMass as well. They play that game at home, though.
Oh.
And then Georgia
They
Tech.
didn't want to go to UMass?
So Georgia would have one loss in that scenario. Man, this has the potential to be a wild tie-breaking situation.
Yeah.
Mizzou has one loss in this scenario as well.
I was looking up the Big Ten tiebreaker when I was up in Champaign, and I think the last one is like the commissioner basically does like a bingo thing where he spins it around. That's going to be it. We're going to get like a national televised 11 a.m. All right, here's the SEC commissioner, and he's spinning the wheel and, oh, Mizzou made it. Wow.
There's a scenario where Texas A&M, LSU, Georgia, and Mizzou all have one loss in conference play this year. Head-to-head would be one of the tiebreakers, so A&M would, in that scenario, get in over Mizzou. They would not have the tiebreaker, though, over LSU, so I don't know how this works in a 4-team tiebreak situation. That would be an interesting one to have to break. Record versus all conference opponents that are in common would be another one, and I don't have enough time to go through those. It's going to be a wild scenario potentially down the stretch this year.
Workshop this one.
All right, from the 636, guys, does old man DeAndre Hopkins change how you feel about the Chiefs? He absolutely does. He's a competent NFL wide receiver, and that's what they were lacking. They really needed just a guy. It's 3rd and 6. Hey, can somebody other than Travis Kelce get open? Because Kelce's commanding a double team. He ain't open because he's 50, and he doesn't have the same speed that he once did. Anybody else? Anybody else? And the answer is typically, hey, Xavier Worthy's running free, and they just don't trust him right now. Patrick Mahomes very clearly does not trust him to the point where he's going to throw that. Hopkins, he will trust. So that's why I feel differently about him. I don't think he's going to have 1,300 yards this season, but I think he helps them.
Yeah, I think he helps them too. I mean, at this point, they just need bodies that they can go and trust. I mean, you just mentioned to me Sky Moore, another guy that's injured. He wasn't really on the field much, but they need somebody that, hey, to your point, it's 3rd and 6. You're going to have to stop this guy. And it can't be Travis Kelce because you almost need him to be that guy when you get to the playoffs. You almost just got to kind of limit Travis Kelce and what you're doing with him in the regular season because you're right. He's getting up there in age, and he's still not as explosive as he once was.
Yeah, and in the red zone, too, there are a few guys I still trust, even at his age, to finish off drives as a red zone target than a DeAndre Hopkins.
He is Bradford Bruns. That is Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube as well. As always, youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. Coming up next, the Cardinals aren't expected to be big players in free agency. In fact, they might not be players at all. But I do think they should be taking a look at these two pitchers in particular. We'll tell you who those are next here on 101 ESPN.
It's time for Jamie's jersey giveaway, and this one is legit. Big old Colt 55 Colton Parayko. You can get yourself a chance to win the number 55 signed Blues jersey. It's really easy to get entered. All you have to do is go to 101ESPN.com or visit the 101 ESPN mobile app, sign up, register, and you will have a chance to win the Colton Parayko autographed jersey. All of that, of course, brought to you by Bud Light. Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Off-season Cards coverage can be found right here. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, 101 ESPN. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone, days like today are supposed to be like Christmas for me. I love it. It's the day that Jim Bowden releases his projected 2024 free agent contracts. Normally, I start scouring these things, and I'm open up the Christmas gift. And I'm like, oh, which one of these are the Cardinals going to be able to get this offseason? And then we'll do like Tender Tuesdays. We'll do a matchmaker game with it. We do all kinds of stuff. This is basically, the basis of our offseason because it's the basis of the Cardinals offseason. Not this year, unfortunately.
No, we're not going to convince ourselves how they could get like Corbin Burns.
No, Juan Soto, by the way, is projected 15 years, $622 million.
Wow. 15 years?
Corbin Burns, 7 years, $250 million. The newest Japanese pitcher coming over, they are anticipating a pretty significant contract for him. Garrett Cole, they think, is potentially going to opt into his contract. Max Fried, I found to be really interesting. 6 years. $175 million. They compared it to the Carlos Rodon contract as the similarity. That is one that I think we would be talking a lot about if the Cardinals were going to be players in this year's market. Unfortunately, they will not be. That is not the expectation. They are going to be shedding payroll, not adding a
Blake
lot of
Snell's new contract by Bowden's kind of similar to the gray one. That's us.
3 years, $100 million is what they are anticipating for Blake Snell. So, yeah, not
Swipe
happening.
Right.
Willie Adames, by the way, congratulations. You are a LA Dodger. 6 years, $150 million. They've got his most likely scenario to sign with the Dodgers, the Brewers, or the Braves. I think the Dodgers or the Braves make a ton of sense for him.
You know, the other one to me that makes a ton of sense, Padres. They need shortstop, Ha-Seong Kim out.
They have like 20 of them, though.
Yeah, why not add another? Then more trade chips for A.J. Preller to wheel and deal.
Christian Walker would have been another one that we'd be talking about, I would assume, this offseason. 3 years, $72 million. He's 33.
You know, we wanted to bring him back, supposedly.
1 year, $15 million is what they're projecting for Paul Goldschmidt. Anyways, so those are a bunch of guys that the Cardinals will not be signing going into this offseason. I find it to be more interesting the guys that they could sign. I don't anticipate them being super aggressive, but I could see them maybe, depending on what they do with Sonny Gray and Eric Fetty and Miles Michaelis and Steven Matz. I don't know how many, if any, they are going to be able to trade this offseason, but if they trade a lot of them, I could see them being in the market for a bounce-back starter candidate. One of those guys I mentioned last week is Walker Buehler, Dodger starter. He's 30 years old. He has not had a very good season. However, he was excellent earlier in his career, and we've seen this before. Guys get injured, they don't look right for a couple of seasons, and then boom, it all comes together. I'm looking at you, Luis Severino, who this year was really good for the New York Mets. When you've got that kind of stuff, it typically doesn't just evaporate and go away forever. By the time you're 30, 31, 32, you got another year or two left in you. I would be interested in the Cardinals potentially taking a flyer on Walker Buehler. Jim Bowden, former Major League Baseball general manager, has Buehler anticipated to sign a 1 year, $10 million contract with incentives. That's the kind of thing the Cardinals could or should be able to do this offseason if they're able to move on from some of the money that they currently have on the books. The other one that he has in here that I find to be really interesting is Shane Bieber. Formerly a consistent Cy Young candidate for the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians' previous player development guy is now a part of the Cardinals organization. I don't know if any relationship exists there, but I would imagine he's at least familiar with Shane Bieber. He says he expects a low base salary with incentive for games started and innings pitched for Shane Bieber and potentially some option years to be added onto there. That's another guy that I would be testing the waters on. He's 29 years old. Again, previously a consistent Cy Young candidate. If he comes back healthy from the surgery, maybe it's like mid-season that he returns. I could see that being a great signing by the Cardinals. Potentially trade him either next year at the deadline or next offseason, and you get some value there. Those are the kinds of moves that I would like to see the Cardinals make. T-Bone, do you think they will be interested in those kinds of moves, and do they interest you?
I'll start with if they interest me, because the Cardinals is very boring. I think these are the kind of moves the Cardinals should be exploring, because it's like there's multiple paths you can take after you do it, right? You sign him to this deal. Let's use Shane Bieber as the example. He probably comes back. My guess would be like around the All-Star break, since he had Tommy John so early in the season in 2024, only made 2 starts through 12 innings, and then he had his surgery. That's the kind of guy that you end up bringing him in, and if it's a 2-year deal, you end up bringing him in. Maybe he ends up pitching well in just a small sample size, and then you can potentially trade him if you're out of it at the deadline. Maybe you end up holding on to him, and he ends up becoming a guy that you end up re-signing. And like worst case scenario, it just doesn't work out. He never gets healthy again. You know what? You paid him $5-10 million. You can just move on at the end of the season. There's no real risk to this kind of signing, and it makes all the sense in the world to bring in someone like this, especially if you're able to move on from a Sonny Gray or a Miles Michaelis, for example. You start to open up some holes, and yes, Palante kind of slides in. You're going to have Michael McGreevy really slide in. We also know that we've seen this. Pitchers get hurt, and the odds are you're not going to have your rotation mostly healthy for the big chunk of the season. These kind of things tend to work themselves out. You can bring in a Shane Bieber. He fills in a spot in your rotation. It just makes all the sense in the world. Will the Cardinals do it? No. They're too, and maybe with Chaim Bloom involved, it changes a little bit. But we've seen this with Mo. They look at it as, hey, we've got 5 starters. We don't need to go out there and add another one. And they would tell you the whole excuse of, well, it's hard for us to go to somebody and sell them on this idea of, hey, here's where you're going to slot into this rotation. And that might be true, but I don't see the Cardinals getting involved in this. I think they are so focused on cutting payroll, that they're not going to look at these kind of experiments in the rotation. I think they may try this with a bullpen arm or two, bring in someone on a 1-year deal, maybe flip him at the deadline. I don't think they're going to add anybody to this rotation, and I don't think they want to do it because they think Quinn Matthews will probably be here by the All-Star break.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, if the Cardinals are smart, they shouldn't mess with any of these guys that you're talking about right now. Go ahead and follow the Blues model. Get young talent in the house, operate that way. This is what the Blues did. Let's be very clear here. The Blues, early on in the rebuild, brought in Kapanen and Vrana as potential bounce-back candidates to see if there was anything left in the tank. They spent more money on those guys than they would have if they just went super young in those spots. Then this past offseason, they bring in guys like Matthew Joseph as a stopgap option. That is exactly what we're talking about
Fox,
here.
another one of those guys.
Absolutely. You need stabilizing figures, whether that's in your rotation or guys that are a part of your position player core, just to keep things staying afloat. You don't want to be a true teardown team. That's a disaster, man. The other thing is when you don't have a good rotation, when you don't have a stable rotation as a rebuilding team, there's a trickle-down effect there. It's a trickle-down effect on your position players because they know everything's going to be put into play, and then it wears on your offense as well. And then that mentally starts to break some of your position players, which is not what you want. The other bigger issue here is if you don't have a stable rotation, now the innings are placed upon your bullpen, and now you break your bullpen arms before you need them down the road, or you break your bullpen arms before they can provide some value at the deadline when you can trade them to other teams. So there is value in having guys that are just solid starters. And previously, they had done this with guys like Kyle Gibson or Lance Lynn. I would ask for them this offseason to bank on bigger upside plays. The Tigers just did this with Jack Flaherty. They brought him in and were hoping he would be not only a stabilizing force, but a big-time boost to their rotation. He was. They weren't good enough, so they traded him. But that's the kind of thing the Cardinals could do. I think Buehler's one of those guys. I think Shane Bieber could be one of those guys. I would be interested in trading for one of those guys. I don't know who the names are going to be that are on the market, but I think the Cardinals should be in the market potentially for upside plays within their rotation if, and this is where it gets really dicey, they can move on from some of the money that is currently in their rotation. That's the only way you can make this work. Otherwise, there simply aren't spots available for you because then you start really blocking some of your young players, and you don't want to do that. Other thing I wanted to get to on the Cardinals today. John Denton was on with the morning show a little bit earlier. And he described what he believes this Cardinals rebuild is going to look like, T-Bone. I want you to take a listen to this and think, is that what you had in mind as to what this will look like in 2025?
There are going to be a lot of nights where they get their brains beat in. And there's no guarantee that just because you go through this process that you're going to win in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Who knows? A lot of people think, okay, we've been bad for 2 years, now we'll be good. There's no guarantee there when you go through this process. So you've got to get it right. You've got to draft right. You've got to develop right. But, the playoffs are probably not going to happen. And competing for a 12th World Series is definitely not going to happen.
They're going to get their brains beat in on certain nights. T-Bone, maybe I'm Pollyanna because we're removed from the season now, and so I haven't had to watch the Cardinals on a consistent basis in the recent future or in the recent past. I don't know that this team's going to be that bad next year. I don't think they're going to be good, but I think there's a chance that getting Paul Goldschmidt out of the lineup on a day-to-day basis, I think there's a chance they get better in that spot in the lineup next year than they were last year. I don't know what's going to happen with Nolan Arenado, but if they trade him this offseason, would you be shocked if Nolan Gorman's just a better player 1-for-1 next year compared to what they got out of Nolan Arenado this year?
Shocked? No, because I can see it in the range of outcomes. Would I expect it? No. But I wouldn't be shocked. I think they are as bad as John Denton described them.
Okay.
When it comes to that. Look, people don't like this stat, the Pythag, their win total based on their run differential. The Cardinals were expected to be a 76-86 team this year. To me, that's what that roster was. They weren't a 83-79 team, which is what their record ended up being. I think Ollie Barmole, that's why I give him a lot of credit for what he did. Sorry to say it, St. Louis. They were a 10 games below 500 roster. And if we're going to be potentially, and I'm just going to say they keep Nolan Arenado. So let's say they trade Ryan Helsley. Let's say they trade Contreras. They trade Sonny Gray. That's 3 of your 5 best players based on WAR from a season ago. Whew. It's hard for me to imagine that.
Time to step up, boys.
It's hard for me to imagine that there's going to be guys that can fill those roles. They don't have a guy that can take the Sonny Gray roles at number 1. The closer one, I think Ryan Fernandez could do a good job, but he's not going to be as electric as Ryan Helsley is. Catcher position, maybe Herrera ends up being that guy. Maybe they go more of the Pages route, but I don't think you're going to get the kind of offensive performance that he gave you. You don't have a star in your lineup. Arenado's a washed-up star at this point in his career. Jordan Walker's a young kid still trying to find his sea legs. Yeah, they're going to be if they trade those 3 guys that I mentioned, even if they only traded like 1 or 2 of them, right now I would put them as about a 70-win team. That's where they're at, and I think John Denton's spot on. I don't think this is just a simple, this could be 2 years, and then maybe they kind of figure it out. Ideally, sure, I'm sure that's what every front office thinks when they kind of tear some of these things down to the stud. Yeah, I think John Denton's right. There are going to be a lot of rough nights in St. Louis this coming summer.
I could see that. I don't know that it's going to get as horrible as what it was for the Astros when they were tanking, what it was for the Cubs when they were tanking, what it was for the Royals when they were tanking, what it was for the Orioles when they were tanking. I don't think you're going to get that low.
I agree.
Could you be a 70-win team next year? I could see that. But it could be a 70-win team, kind of the way that I felt coming into this blue season. I don't feel this bad about them now, but coming into this blue season, I feared, hey, they might have a worse record than they were a year ago. But you feel better watching them because you're seeing the future play out in front of your eyes. I could see some of that with the Cardinals where you get to the end of next year and you're like, hey, man, I kind of like this Quinn Matthews. I think Andre Palante, he's going to be a back end of the rotation starter long-term for them. There were real strides from Jordan Walker. Mason Wynn is just an established major leaguer at this point. Alec Burleson, I feel good about. Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman. Like, Ivan Herrera, maybe he takes a big step as an offensive contributor next season. I could see a scenario where you win 75 games and you leave the year thinking, all right, next year we have a chance actually to win like 86 and be a playoff threat again.
That would be great. The season, I think that they're going to look to kind of, I don't know if it's emulate, but it's the one that, to your point of like, hey, they're probably going to be losing, but hopefully you see some of the right steps and you kind of can look into the future, whether that means they're going to be spending or you just think, okay, maybe Jordan Walker finally is hitting that stride, is the Nationals from a year ago. And I don't know if they've got the prospects like they had James Wood come up middle of the year. I think they had another one of their outfielders there. I can't remember his name. Dylan Cruz, I think maybe got up near the end of the year. But they finished 71-91. But they feel a lot better about where they are because they had C.J. Abrams that played well for the first half of the season.
I would point to the Red Sox as the team that I would hope that they're similar to. I don't know that they have the pitching, though. The Red Sox had 81 wins. I don't think you're going to be that good, but true talent, 75, something like that.
Yeah,
but the feel of the Red Sox coming off of that, I could see.
The weird thing is like, I don't know how people feel about the Red. Like, for me, Washington, they feel like they're building momentum because they feel like they've got the young core now. And that's why I kind of circle them as the team of, like, you know, to me, next year will not be about wins and losses. Just like for me, the Blues, it's not about wins and losses this year and their point total. It's about looking at it going, okay, I can see where they're going, I can see where they're building, and I see the young guys taking the right steps forward. That's why I would almost circle the Nationals. If you told me next year that the Cardinals end up going 71-91, but I look at the roster and go, Jordan Walker found his step, Nolan Gorman started to produce again, you have Mason Wynn that again put up another back-to-back season where he's just a productive big leaguer, and then Andre Palante, Michael McGreevy, and maybe you see a little splash of Quinn Matthews in there. I can see where I leave that season where you're 20 games below 500 and go, Yeah, okay. I like what I see from the Cardinals.
World Series, not something the Cardinals are aspiring to be in right now, but it does start tomorrow night. World Series game number 1, pregame coverage at 6 o'clock right here on 101 ESPN. Again, Friday night, Dodgers versus the Yankees. Game 1 tomorrow right here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, it's time for some NFL quick hitters, including a quarterback rankings that does not have Patrick Mahomes as the current best quarterback in the league. Is that the correct way to rank it right now? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
It's time for another moment in Blues history.
On this day back in 2019, the Blues would score 3 power play goals to power them to a 5-2 victory over the LA Kings. Jordan Binnington also the hero in this game as he made 33 of 35 saves. But in the game, the Kings would score first, Jeff Carter scoring the goal for LA, but Vince Dunn would respond 4 minutes later on the power play with assists from Jaden Schwartz and Colton Parayko. Alex Pietrangelo would get a power play goal, Braden Shen would get a power play goal and score an empty netter, and Robert Thomas would score his first goal of the season in the second period.
This date in Blues history was powered by Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926. For all your HVAC needs, ClassicAirCare.com.
This is Ron from Swiss Air Heating and Cooling. For the last 35 years, I've been known as the Wizard of Comfort. With the super hot days winding down, our savings are ramping up. Now is the time to replace your old and inefficient heating and cooling system. You can get up to $2,500 in instant rebates on a Daikin system plus 0% financing. Act now and I'll include a 12-year parts and labor warranty. That's 12 years of worry-free operation. $2,500 in instant rebates, 0% financing, and a 12-year parts and labor warranty. Find us online at SwissAirSTL.com.
101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. And every month during the season, you can register to win tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Enter to score free Blues tickets now at 101ESPN.com or on the 101 app. Brought to you by Ted Drewes, serving original frozen custard since 1929. This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's time for some NFL quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario. T-Bone over on The Ringer. They do a quarterback rankings every single week. They put out a new updated list of their quarterback rankings based upon how that individual guy has been playing so far this season. For context here, from 3 and beyond, their list is Josh Allen at 3, Justin Herbert at 4, CJ Stroud at 5, Joe Burrow at 6, Matt Stafford, your boy, at 7, Dak Prescott still in the top 8, Geno Smith at 9, and at number 10, Kyler Murray. All season long, and I believe for the last 4 years, Patrick Mahomes has been at number 1 on this quarterback rankings list. Not anymore. Today, they made the switch to Lamar Jackson as the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. T-Bone, do you believe that Lamar Jackson, as of today, is the best quarterback in the league?
I think so. Based on the way he's played so far this year, I think Lamar's shown that he's the best quarterback. I mean, he's throwing, his passing game looks good. He's running the ball. I mean, he's 5th in passing yards so far this season. He's using his legs to help the offense get down the field. He's just a dual threat weapon. I think he is the best quarterback right now in the NFL. And can I be honest? Mahomes isn't 2 for me. Josh Allen is 2 for me right now. Mahomes has more interceptions than he does touchdowns right now. He's not playing good football. Now, does that mean that I'm not going to have him at number 1 by the time the playoffs get like a game in? No, he's going to turn the tide at some point here in the regular season. But for right now, he's not a top 2 quarterback. For me, it's Lamar 1, Josh Allen 2, then Mahomes 3.
Give me the only undefeated team in the National Football League. I don't care right now. It's immaterial to me what's going on in the regular season as far as the rankings at the top of that position, because that's fine. That's fine in the here and now, but it's irrelevant when it comes down the stretch until Lamar Jackson actually demonstrates to us in the postseason beyond round number 1 that he is able to step up in those situations. Until then, I don't care about it.
This is a Brady rule for me, because I did this with Brady throughout his career. I'd be like, oh man, he's not the best quarterback this year. Look at what Peyton's doing. Look at what all these other guys are doing. Look at what Rodgers is doing. Look at what, at one point, Matt Ryan is doing. Never mattered. Until he retired, Tom Brady was the best quarterback in the league. And yes, that includes when Patrick Mahomes was in the league doing what he was doing. Brady was still the best, dude. So for me, Patrick Mahomes will be the number 1 quarterback in the NFL until proven otherwise. I'm not trying to be a homer here. When you are as accomplished as Brady was and you're as accomplished as Mahomes now is, I'm going to have that guy at number 1. I think Lamar, though, has elevated his game this year. I do think he's playing at another level. But I've said this before about Lamar. And then I get to the postseason, or you get to December, and you're like, man, I don't know. I think we're going to get to the postseason this year, and this is why we're going to get to another piece of this here in just a minute. And we're going to say, okay, so he's throwing to a less than what he once was, Mark Andrews. He's throwing to Zay Flowers, and I'm really worried about Rashad Bateman. Like, that's the guy that's going to beat me in a playoff game. And I think my answer is no. And so I wanted to get to the second thing here as we go through some NFL quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario. What is a trade that you would like to see prior to this year's deadline? Because we've already seen some good ones, man. We're 2 weeks away now, I think, from the NFL trade deadline. We've already seen 3 former Pro Bowl caliber wide receivers that have been moved to new teams, contenders in the AFC. T-Bone, is there a trade that you would like to see? Because I've got one specifically for the Baltimore Ravens that I would like to see.
Well, the one for me with the Baltimore Ravens would be, and I don't like saying this because I got my shirt on today, would be that they go out and they get Cooper Kupp. Because if they get a number 1 wide receiver, how much of those questions that you have about the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs change? Now you've got the running back in Derrick Henry, as long as he's healthy by the time you get there. You got Lamar, that's the dual threat quarterback, and now he's got a wide receiver cast that he can throw to. Maybe he doesn't have the tight end in terms of Mark Andrews. I'd say likely, though, I could see raising his game maybe to the next level once you get into the playoffs. I agree. They are that one weapon short, and I think when you get to the playoffs in the NFL, you've got to have all the pieces there. There no longer is this, hey, we're going to have our quarterback just elevate everybody else. Only guys that do that are Mahomes and are Brady.
I've got another one for them. It's Deontay Johnson. I would love to see Deontay Johnson, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, now with the Carolina Panthers, slot receiver, just work across the middle of the field with Lamar. That's where he used to be able to win with Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is not the same guy this year, although he did have a good week last week, couple of touchdown catches for him. I would love to see Lamar with Deontay Johnson, another young receiver that he can work with. with, and then potentially sign Deontay Johnson to a long-term contract extension in the offseason if they end up having chemistry that you see.
The team I wanted to see Johnson go to is Washington.
That'd be fun.
That's the one that I wanted to see him go to because, I mean, you mentioned young wide receiver. Get him with a young quarterback, sign him to the contract. You got him and Terry McLaurin there. Now you get that 1-2 punch. That's where I want to see him go.
I was going a different direction with the Washington Commanders. What I would like to see them do
Cooper Kupp
is improve their defense.
Yes.
I think their defense is a huge problem for them right now. I think they are already further along than they anticipated because Jaden Daniels is a stud. I would like to see them not go all in, but mortgage a little bit of the future and go trade for Max Crosby. Max Crosby, I do not believe is going to be on the Raiders for long. Maybe it's not this year. Maybe it's not the trade deadline. This is a big move that you would have to make to do so at the deadline. Maybe in the offseason they get rid of him, but I would like to see Washington get super aggressive and trade for Max Crosby this year at the deadline.
You read my mind. Is Detroit too obvious of a possibility as well as maybe a destination there? That seems like a great fit without Hutchinson. Do you mortgage enough there?
Man.
It's enticing.
If you're the Lions, I think you have to. If he becomes available and they say, hey, first-round pick for Max Crosby, are you willing to do it? I think I would say yes. Because it's not just for this year. If you're the Lions, you're saying, okay, we're going to have Aiden Hutchinson and Max Crosby for the next couple of seasons.
Good luck.
Coming off of the edge. Let's see what this looks like, man. We've got 2 pass rushers that are up there with anybody else in the NFL.
And that's how, like, I know they're not going to plan for probably Kansas City, but how do you stop Mahomes? I've always talked about this. It's you've got to get pressure. Why does Las Vegas give Kansas City so many troubles, even though they're a crappy organization and a bad football team? Because Max Crosby's always in the face of Patrick Mahomes.
Look at the 49ers, too. We saw it last week with Brock Purdy. How do you give him trouble? Well, you get those edge rushers. I mean, this is the case for any quarterback, really, but Sam Darnold, in your own division, how do you make him feel uncomfortable? How do you make him start throwing those turnover-worthy plays? You get pressure on him, man. So, yeah, I if I'm the Lions, it would be really hard for me to do where I'm giving up a first-round pick when I've got so many guys that are coming up for contracts. It's going to get expensive quickly for them, and they'll have to do what the Chiefs and the Bills have done over the last couple of years where you kind of have to reset your roster. But, yeah, I'd be willing to do it just because they are all in for a Super Bowl, and that is a franchise that has really struggled to be able to get one. Last thing here, a little bit of news that came out yesterday as we go through some NFL quick hitters on 101 ESPN. John Mara, the owner of the New York Giants, came out and said he does not anticipate firing either Joe Schoen, the general manager, or Coach Brian Daboll during or after the 2024 season. T-Bone, do you think that's deserved?
I think Daboll deserves to still be around. I think Daboll's actually a pretty good head coach. I mean, he has had the Giants competitive in every game, it feels like, this year, even though they're 2-5. He almost beat the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday Night Football. Their GM's the one that I just don't know because I don't understand what their direction is. And they made the move in the offseason where they go out and they trade for Brian Burns. They lock him up to the contract extension. I think they've got an incredible defensive line, even though I don't think it's played all that well this year. They've got to get a quarterback. And, watching Hard Knocks in the offseason, it's clear they were trying to get up to trade for, I don't remember which quarterback it was. I think it was Jane Daniels, if I remember correctly. If he finds a way to get a quarterback this offseason, I guess that's the only hope that you're still giving him is, hey, we'll give him one more year. Let's see if he can figure out our quarterback situation. And if he ends up drafting the guy of the future, then he's going to be the guy with us for the long run.
It's almost a case of working backward because I think you have landed that transformational wide receiver, right? It neighbors that threat. Now, who's going to be the guy delivering the football long term? It's not going to be Daniel Jones, and it's certainly, no offense, isn't going to be Drew Lock.
Matt Stafford? Could he be the guy?
I just don't know if they're in a spot where they are going to be, even like if they get Stafford, are they in, well, they are in win now mode by doing that, but do they have the roster to win now?
I thought that the defense was going to be good this year, and it just hasn't been for the most part. I think you've got a number one weapon in Neighbors. Their offensive line is not very good. Probably not. Probably not. And so the answer is probably they're too far away, and so you don't go out there and get a guy like Stafford, but I don't think that guy's available in this year's draft. You guys watch as much college football as I do. Do you see anybody that's really going to change the fortunes of an NFL franchise?
Outside of Sanders, no.
And I'm not sure Shador is that guy.
I'm not sold on him as the one.
Yeah, he's the only one that has a chance at that.
Fair. I look at some of these quarterbacks and I'm like, man, I think all of the dudes last year were so, like Drake May to me, so much better than any of these guys that we've watched in this year's class.
Even Sanders, you'd put him ahead.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think he's more he is a guy that has higher upside to me than Shedeur. Shedeur just makes some decisions. Some of his big plays that he makes are unbelievable. But I've seen that before, dude. Sam Darnold was that guy in college. People forget.
Now.
Sam Darnold was amazing. Jameis Winston was that guy in college where he would make 6 puzzling throws a game, and then in the second half, he would make 6 of the best throws that you've ever seen a college quarterback make. So that's kind of the guy that I would probably compare him to most is what we saw from Jameis in college. That's Shedeur to me, but I think he's good. Yeah. I wouldn't take him in the top 10. I'm not doing that. I don't think he changes the course of the New York Giants. No, not at all.
You throwing out the Stafford name, I was like thinking, okay, who's the team that are close? That if the Rams move on after this year, Pittsburgh. That's the roster that's built ready to win now. They've got some pieces there offensively. Really they've got the defense that's in place. It's the only reason they're 5-2 right now. Let's be honest. That's the roster that you look at and go, they're just the one quarterback away that if you bring in someone like a Stafford, it really changes the trajectory.
I thought Miami could be that team too, and then they re-signed Tua to that long-term extension, so they're no longer going to be that team.
If Rodgers retired, would the Jets be that team? I don't know if he's going. I don't think he's going to retire, but
I think we've seen that team's further away than we thought.
Yeah, that's fair.
He's Tanner. That is Bradford. I'm BK. Coming up next, how do the Blues overcome this Robert Thomas injury? Easier said than done. Can they stay afloat until Christmas? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
You can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
Vitale and it's Blues Game Day on 101 ESPN.
Blues Game Day is presented by Buffalo Wild Wings, the ultimate arena for wings and wins. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues face off against their old chief. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns with this Sports Center update powered by Saliga Heating and Cooling. In just under 6 hours on 101 ESPN, Scotiabank Arena will be the scene. St. Louis battling its former coach Craig Berube, now helming Toronto. He joined BK and Ferrario yesterday to deconstruct his new team's approach.
We don't want to be making so many east-west plays. We want to make north plays, and we really want to put pressure on the other team and really make them make mistakes. That's what we're trying to do.
Berube's Leafs dodge Robert Thomas tonight. Number 18 suffered a fractured ankle versus Winnipeg. More injury developments. College pigskin. Mizzou listing Brady Cook as doubtful for Week 9's critical Alabama showdown. Nate Noel and Mookie Cooper also get that murky tag. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield Studio on 101 ESPN.
Robert Thomas is going to be up for at least 6 weeks with a fractured ankle. They said that is when they're going to reevaluate his status, so it could be even longer. That takes you to roughly mid-December, T-Bone. That's about 25 games. So the question for the Blues really is, how do you stay afloat? How do you go roughly 500 over your next 25 games while you know Robert Thomas is out? With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That's not an easy task. You're going up against some really difficult opponents during this stretch, and frankly, overcoming a loss of your number one center, not an easy thing for this team to do. They didn't have a second-line center, much less a top-line center. So now you're going with Braden Chin as the top-line center, Buchnevich, who's not naturally a center, as your second-line center, Holloway, who's not a natural centerman, as your third-line center, and then Foxa, who's done a really good job for them this year as your fourth-line center. That middle six leaves a lot to be desired down the middle. T-Bone, how do they do this? How do they stay afloat over the next 6+ weeks without Robert Thomas in your mind?
I think it's just going to come down to, can they be a goal suppression team? You know, they're not a great 5-on-5 offense. They haven't been all season, even when they had Robert Thomas. It's going to come down to, can they win those kind of slugfest style games? They're going to have to win the games against the Islanders like they did, where it's like 1-0, 2-1, 3-2. That's kind of the range of outcomes that they're going to have to have. They're going to have to be sound defensively. They're going to have the defense being shut down at times, and then you're just going to have, in my opinion, Bennington steal games for you as well. I think the nights where you're off defensively, where they've had a couple this year where it's been, I think they've been better defensively all season so far than they were a year ago.
Agreed.
But there's going to be nights where you're going to have an off night, and there's going to be more shot opportunities that come against Bennington or Holford. They're going to have to steal games for you. Like, it's going to come down to your defense being solid and your goaltenders stealing some games. And I think, to me, because you struggle at 5-on-5, your power play is going to have to be the difference maker for you. I think their power play, I don't think their power play scored since the game against Vegas, which is about 4 games now. They've got to find a way for this power play to start clicking, because that's the way you make up for a lack of 5-on-5 offense. So those are kind of the keys for me. You got to be good in goal suppression, be sound defensively, going to have your goalkeepers play well throughout the stretch, which that one I'm not worried about at all. And then your power play is going to have to take it to another level to help with that lack of offense at 5-on-5.
Yeah, I think this team knows what it is, man. I do. And I think a lot of it comes down to goal suppression. They've got 2 really good goalies. They've got defensemen that they can trust. Now, I don't love what they're doing with their defensive core tonight. I don't
like that third pair?
Taking Matt Kessel out and putting Scott Perunovich in. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me, but the last time that I freaked out about one of the moves that they decided to make, they took Nathan Walker out of the lineup. They put Kasperi Kapanen into the lineup, and then Kapanen played really well. So I'm not going to freak out over it. I just don't. It's not something that I would personally prefer them to do. I think this is a team that's going to win with goal suppression. How do you do that, though, when your number one center is out, who was a big part of that goal suppression? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And it's one of the things that I'm most looking forward to seeing how they play tonight, because you could do this for a period or two, right? We saw that in the last game, where they didn't end up having Robert Thomas for the final, 25 minutes or whatever of that game?
Yeah.
They found a way. and they double shifted guys, and they ended up having a really good third period. Can you do that for 10 games, 20 games, 30 games? That's where things become really difficult. To me, the one guy that I'm circling, and it's the easy thing to do, but I think it's the right thing to do, it's Braden Shen, man. We wondered, can Braden Shen be a second-line center? The Blues told you with their actions, the answer to that is no. If they thought he could be a second-line center, he would have been playing there over Pavel Buchnevich. They committed to the Buch at center project because they clearly, without saying it publicly, didn't think Shen was capable of doing that. Well, now he's on your top line as a center. What does that look like? Can he thrive in that role? I don't know. I thought his line with Holloway and Joseph was the best line on the team that we've seen so far this year. Night in, night out, they knew who they were. They were going to go out there and grind down the opposition, and they did a good job of it. Can you do that same thing with Saad and Neighbors? I think you can. I think those guys are just basically more talented versions of the players that he previously played with. Let's go see it, though. Let's go see it. It's not going to be easy, and it starts out with a really difficult opponent and trying to do that against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that lives in your zone. This is going to have to be a counterattack. Good luck, man. Good luck. T-Bone, you did say something interesting yesterday, though, that I wanted to flesh out a little bit more. You said you believe that you're going to learn a lot about Drew Bannister in this stretch. Why? What do you think we're going to learn about the head coach of the Blues while they're without Robert Thomas?
I think now is when you really start to see kind of a head coach's impact, is when you start to lose key players, right? Because now you got to find a way to try and maximize your roster with less. And I think we'll see how he's able to do that. I agree with you. I think for a team that's supposed to be moving more towards goal suppression, especially with Robert Thomas out, it's a little puzzling the move he's making tonight by putting Scott Perunovich in the lineup on that third pair with Joseph. So that's not a defensive pairing that I expect is going to be a great defensive pair to rely on. It's probably going to be a defensive liability. That's a questionable decision when you're going without Robert Thomas. You know, I'm trying to maximize these lines without Robert Thomas. Okay, is Braden Shen our top line center? What do we do with the wingers that are going to be around him? And how do we utilize these matchups? It's a little harder tonight now that they're on the road in Toronto. But, you know, they're going to be, when they get back at home, now you get to mix and match things a little bit more. You get to try and get your whatever matchup you like best. And now it's going to come down to, how does he move these lines around? How does he try and get Kyrou better advantages? How does he get Shen, if that's going to be their top defensive pairing? Who does he have them match up against? And what are the things that he's going to do to try and help them out if it's not going well? If Shen's not a top-line center, what does he do? What adjustments does he make? There are no excuses for the head coach. He's got to find a way to make them about a 500 team in this stretch. I think you're going to find out a lot about what Drew Bannister is as a head coach in this stretch.
Interestingly, mixing and matching has been the calling card for Bannister over the better part of the first 7 games. So in some ways, I think actually the different permutations, the different combinations through which he was shifting and which was causing really that tactic some aggravation among Blues fans. In a way, I wonder if we look back at it and say it was a bit of a training ground per se, or at least this is the mentality working through all the different personnel. You have a better feel for how all kinds of different guys are meshing with one another.
Yeah, I don't know how much we're going to learn about him in this stretch. I think I would go the opposite direction. I would probably zig while everybody else zags here. I think it's a really tough situation to be in. That's like saying I'm going to learn a lot about my coach while the star quarterback is out. I mean, you can. The elite of the elite coaches find a way, right? I feel like we learned a lot about Matt LaFleur while Jordan Love was out this year. He said, hey, we're going to run the ball 50 times. Malik, we're going to see if you can throw it 12 times, complete 6 of them. Hopefully they're all deep passes, and that's the way we're going to win this game. They found a way. They found a way to win. But that's a couple of games. So we're talking about 25 games here that you've got to be able to sustain this kind of a game plan. And I also don't know that I would put Bannister into that elite coach category. If you think that we have a chance to have an elite coach in St. Louis with Drew Bannister, I think that will show itself over the next 25 games. I think there's a better chance, though, that he's somewhere in the middle. And for like the middle 20 coaches in the league, I think they all just kind of meander about and hope to have something click into place. I'm not sure that thing is going to click into place for this team. Not right now. I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic is the way that I would probably frame it. So I don't know how much we're going to learn about Drew Bannister in this stretch. If we do learn something, I think it's probably good. I'm not sure you can learn anything necessarily bad about Bannister while Robert Thomas is out, though.
I would disagree with. I think you can learn bad from a coach as well. Like, it's a puzzling decision. We agreed to pull out a Perunovich, right? Like, he can start to make some decisions as he starts to potentially panic if this starts to snowball a little bit. That's the thing to monitor. I do think there is a part of this where you could end up leaving. You're probably right. Odds are it's just going to be, hey, we don't learn a whole lot about Bannister. I think there is a scenario where you can learn a lot of the bad about Drew Bannister in this stretch as well.
He's Tanner. That is Bradford on BK. Coming up next, it's time for the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
Saturday, Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Pregame at 10:30, kickoff at 11. The NCAA plays on 101 ESPN.
In the fast-paced world of digital marketing, making connections is a challenge for any business. But what if we told you there is a place where connections aren't just made, they're grown? Meet 2060 Digital, your premier Google partner and top-tier digital agency. We don't just follow trends, we set them. At 2060 Digital, we're not just another agency, we're your strategic partner. We dive deep into your challenges and develop solutions that drive measurable outcomes. Ready to elevate your digital presence with campaigns that connect? Google 2060 Digital today.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The junk drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
T-Bone, do you have any interest in driving a Zamboni?
Oh, I'd love to drive a Zamboni.
What about you, Bradford?
Why not? Marshy did it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he
Marsh
did.
did do it.
Recently,
out at
too.
Centene?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, last year. I think it was last year.
Just a few months ago, actually, right? The camp?
Somewhere along there.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, all right, Marshy. It's something that I've always wanted to do. Just looks amazing, right? Well, there's a video that was posted on social media recently of a gentleman in Western Quebec who was driving it around. He's 25 years old. Maybe this was Marshy. He went up to Western Quebec to do it. Maybe that's what we were thought.
That's so Marshy.
Unfortunately, he was then detained because the 25-year-old had a couple of beers beforehand, and he crashed the Zamboni into the boards. He and it went into the boards together. They ended up taking him away. They were like, hey, man, are you good? Everything okay here? He didn't pass the sobriety test, was arrested. Nobody was hurt. The door in the rink was damaged, unfortunately, for him. He's got to pay for that damage. And
don't say.
He's taken away. I got to tell you, if it was a guarantee, like there was a bunch of stuff that was, bubbled, you were in a bubble boy type of a situation, right? Having a couple of drinks and then being in a 100% safe environment, nobody could potentially get hurt, driving around a Zamboni on the ice, that sounds amazing. I can see how you could get yourself into that scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, it did not end well for anybody there. But
Did he work there?
Just as a 25-year-old man.
Yeah, I'm going to say he didn't work there because I could see how that happens. Yeah. Because if you work there, I don't know how fun driving the Zamboni is, right?
Yeah, at that point, it's just your job. Yeah. And you're doing your job, and unfortunately, you do so.
If you've never driven the Zamboni,
that's not great.
I see how you get in VK spot where you just have a couple and you're like, hey, it'll be fun. Yeah, let's go Zamboni driving.
That would be so much.
You and your buddies are hanging out there, and then suddenly you're like, you won't do it.
We should get you on a Zamboni at Centene. We're out there every Friday.
I don't feel like anybody needs that. If Marshy's already done it, we've got one. We've got one for the station. That's a win.
I'd do it again. Yeah. You know the one thing I never want to do, though, which it is the one where, at intermission during Blues games, they send out the Zambonis, and there's people that are sitting on them. I don't want to be sitting up there while people are staring at me. No, I don't want to just be sitting there in place while someone's driving me around in the Zamboni.
I could see you being the guy that takes the snow shovel to the ice.
I can't skate, but
during intermission,
I would try it.
I feel like you got to wear the outfit though that they do. The Blues girls, you've got to be in the same exact outfit. That would be amazing.
The Blues would never want that though, because I don't think any of us can really skate that well.
He's T-Bone. That is Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in 15 minutes, Ken Hitchcock, the Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues head coach, now an advisor, special advisor with the Blues. He's going to join us on the show. He was the head coach of the Blues when they dealt with the Jaden Schwartz injury, fractured ankle. Now, it was a little different in that he had to get surgery for his fractured ankle. He was out for like 8 weeks, long time with that injury. How did the Blues overcome that? As a coach, how would he go about trying to overcome this injury for Robert Thomas? Hitch will join us coming up at 1:15. But next, the Cardinals had good timing to take a step back when they did, when you look around the National League. We'll talk about that, explain it a bit next year on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. Check out either the 101 mobile app or 101ESPN.com for your chance to win a signed puck autographed by Blues defenseman Philip Broberg. Get entered to win that Philip Broberg signed puck right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Cardinals might have some good timing when it comes to taking a step back in their quest to win another World Series. I was reading these quotes that came out of the Mets press conference yesterday with President of Baseball Operations David Stearns. He sounds like the kind of guy that's anticipating being very aggressive this offseason, like Juan Soto types of aggressive. Ooh. I don't know if it's going to work out for them. I don't know that Soto will for sure sign with the New York Mets. He ultimately is the one that makes that decision. But I don't think that he will return to the Yankees because of money. I think the Mets will make every possible alluring contract proposal to get Juan Soto to switch sides in New York and come to the Yankees, or come to the Mets, excuse me. I think they're going to be in play for a bunch of the pitchers that are on the market this offseason as well. Max Fried, I would not be surprised if he ends up in a New York Mets uniform next season. I think the Mets are ready to really push for this thing. They believe they have some young guys that are coming. They saw the talent really come together this year in a meaningful way. They're ready to push. They're not alone in that regard. This might have been the worst Mets team that we see for the next 3 to 5 years. I don't anticipate the Phillies just taking another step back next year. I would expect the Braves to be better before they get worse. I think that the Dodgers are going to continue adding to their rotation. We'll see if it works, because it hasn't really for the last 5 years. Every season you play a full year, they end up broken by the end of the season. But I think the Dodgers' rotation is going to be better next year. I don't anticipate the Padres taking a sizable step back next year. The Diamondbacks, it's very possible they end up being better if their offense doesn't take the first month of the season off again, and if Corbin Carroll looks like the version of himself from like June to the end of the year next season. For all of those reasons and so many more, I don't think it was ever likely that the Cardinals were going to be able to win a World Series next year. Could they have won the division? Maybe, because this is the NL Central and who knows, right? But once you get into the postseason, we saw what happened to the Brewers this year. We've seen what's happened to the National League Central every year since 2019. They get booted right away. T-Bone, to me, the Cardinals had some pretty good timing here. This was about them looking within, sure, but also them looking externally and saying, look at the NL East, look at the NL West right now, look at where these teams are in their windows. This is the beginning of their window, not the end.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because when you look across the National League, I mean, you're right. It's probably the worst Mets team we're going to see, honestly, probably even the worst Dodgers team we're going to see over the next 5 years. And if you're the Cardinals, like, your roster wasn't really trending in the right direction. Sure, you had some young guys that you were hoping would take steps forwards, like a Jordan Walker, a Nolan Gorman. But look at what they're doing with their pitching. They're like 3 years away from really having potentially a cost control rotation that's effective. And the reason I say is because it's going to take time for Quinn Matthews to get adjusted to the big leagues. We'll see about Tink Hence. Michael McGreevy may have a step back next year. That wouldn't shock me at all. Same with an Andre Palante. They were just kind of piecing the roster together, kind of toothpicks and bubblegum to say, okay, we're still a contender. Let's kind of add in a couple pieces, patch some of our holes. But really, they had a bunch of leaks. Well, now they can just reset everything. And you reset it not only do you get a reset here in perfect timing, you get to reset it with a modern front office. You get someone that's coming in with a different perspective in Chaim Bloom, which I think is great for the organization. And you see if he can find a way to kind of find that path. And he's dealt with dealing with a tough division. I mean, look at where he was. Tampa Bay in the AL East, where you've got the Yankees and the Red Sox, who were spenders, along with Toronto, who had been good at the time, along with when he was in Boston. He knows how to try and kind of find a way to get that balance of, okay, we're going to develop our own guys, potentially spend as well, and try and find a way to compete with a top dog like the New York Yankees, like he had to do in the AL East in his time in Boston. So I think it is the right time for them to go through this reset, allow these teams to do their thing for the next, whatever it is, 3 to 5 years, and then hopefully you've been able to draft and develop. You start to get some pieces up, and then you can go out and start spending to fill whatever hole you may have and get right back with them.
So the other thing that the Cardinals are going to need to do as they take this step back is look at how they evaluate pitching. Because for the last 25 years, The Cardinals have had a pretty similar pitching philosophy. Ground ball pitchers, sinker ballers, guys that put the ball in play, use their defense behind them, and make it work that way, right? That's what Mo has always valued. And for a really long time, it worked. So I don't blame him necessarily for continuing to go back to that well. But eventually, the league adjusted. The league went very much more toward strikeouts, strikeout, strikeout, strikeout. And to get strikeouts, you got to pay for them. You got to pay for power pitchers, or you have to develop them from within. That is something that Chaim Bloom has been able to do. He did it with the Rays. He did it with the Boston Red Sox. You're seeing that pay off for them right now. That is something that Rob Cerfolio, who is the new director of player development, was able to do with the Cleveland Guardians, especially you look at what their bullpen is right now. You look previously at what they've been able to develop with their starting rotation. The Cardinals do not. T-Bone, there was a piece that was put out yesterday by Eno Saris, who works for The Athletic. We love the guy. He's one of the best when it comes to breaking down pitching across Major League Baseball. He's not just a nerd with the numbers. He also actually goes out, talks to these guys, learns about grips, learns about what they're changing. So he's really up with, the latest trends with pitching, right? So yesterday, he has one of these nerdy statistics that he uses. It's called Stuff Plus. Think of this as how nasty are the pitches that the guys are throwing. It's a way to measure that, okay? And if you look at every staff that ended up getting to the postseason this year, you average out their stuff based on this one metric. They were all above league average this year, every single one of them. And the staffs that had some of the best were like the Dodgers and the Yankees. Weird. They're in the World Series right now. Who could have seen that one coming? They did not have great location. These staffs that make it to the postseason, great stuff. You're not totally sure where it's going all the time. And that is something kind of like when you have a real power hitter, you give up something there, right? A lot of the time, guys are swinging for the fences, and that leads to more strikeouts. And teams just have to be okay with that trade-off. You look at Tyler O'Neill this year. He struck out 34% of the time. I think the Red Sox were happy with what they got out of him because he also hit 30 home runs, I believe, this season. You live with that trade-off. But there is a point at which it gets too far in one direction. Nolan Gorman this year struck out 38% of the time. That's just too much for the power that he was giving you. Reason I bring that up, the Cardinals this year, the guys that graded out in this exact same metric on their entire pitching staff, guys that at least threw 5 innings on the entire season, not a high qualifier. Ryan Helsley, Andrew Kittredge, Sonny Gray, Kyle Leahy, Chris Roycroft, and Ryan Fernandez. Those were the only pitchers that pitched for the Cardinals this year that had above average stuff on the season. 6 of them. Overall, you had 15 other pitchers that pitched for you that were below average or worse. That is something that must be improved. And it's clearly something that they are targeting because Kittredge, Gray, Fernandez, Roycroft have all been added to the organization within the last year or so. So they are seeking this out more than they had been previously. Helsley might be gone, though. Kittredge might be gone. Sonny Gray might be gone. And so that means Leahy, Roycroft, Fernandez, 3 relievers, might be all that you have next year that are coming back that were in the organization already that are expected to be above average in this regard moving forward. Long story short, Cardinals during this retool need to start targeting these guys. Guys that have good stuff. Stop leaning on the ground ball pitchers. Use your defense. No. It's time to go out there and get the dudes that are fire-breathing dragons that can get outs the way that the Dodgers, the Yankees, the best teams in baseball are going out there and doing it. You've got to join that mix.
Yeah, 100%. And there's still a spot in the game for some guys that don't have that filthy stuff, like your 4 and 5 starters. Those guys make all the sense to have that. But you can't have just whatever that number was, 6 that you read off, 7 that you read off. Look at Boston. We looked at this in the office. Everybody talked about their pitching early on, right? Look at the pitching that Chaim Bloom kind of drafted and developed and got with the Boston Red Sox. They had 17 guys that were above league average and stuff plus. That's about where you need to be. Most of your bullpen arms need to be that. It's why I wanted Blake Snell. Yeah, Blake Snell walked the world when he was in San Diego. You know why he won a Cy Young? Because his stuff was filthy. And you need that swing and miss stuff.
Look what he did in the second half, man.
Exactly. And you're not going to get through October with guys that are pitching to contact because that means they're more susceptible to those constant slug, where the slug comes in, where you're going to see those home runs that are hit. You want the guys that are just nasty, like Michael Kopech, who can come out of the bullpen, may walk 3 guys in a row, and then strike out the world.
You want guys that can win you a series.
Yeah.
You want guys like Blake Snell, who in the second half of the year had 12 starts and a 1.4 ERA. That's a guy that carries you through October. He could, for a month, give you 4 starts and give up 5 earned runs. and strike out 50. Like, that's the kind of thing that Blake Snell brings you that nobody on the Cardinals currently is capable of. Sonny Gray is the closest to that, and Sonny Gray is a really good pitcher, and it was a great signing last offseason. You need a lot more of that. You're missing that within your system right now. With Tanner Hendrickson and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, Ken Hitchcock, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues head coach, now doing some advising for them. As a head coach, how do you go about replacing somebody like Robert Thomas? You're never going to replace him one for one. How do you keep your team afloat, though, while he's out? We'll ask Ken Hitchcock that when he joins us next year on 101 ESPN.
Catch the Balloon Party with Tim McKernan and Action Jackson. Weekdays from 10 to 11 a.m. on 101 ESPN. The fastest hour of sports radio is driven by Munganast and Burkhardt Alton Toyota. This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Alongside alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex Ferrario out today. He'll be back in tomorrow. He'll have pregame coverage for Blues versus Maple Leafs tonight starting at 5 o'clock right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. But right now, we are happy and thrilled to have the pleasure to be joined by Ken Hitchcock, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues head coach, of course, Stanley Cup champion as well. We always appreciate the time when Hitch is able to join us here on BK and Ferrario. Hitch, we appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. How's it going?
We're doing all right. We'd be doing better if Robert Thomas was available for the Blues tonight as they take on the Toronto Maple Leafs. One of the reasons we wanted to reach out to you, Hitch, is because you were the head coach here in St. Louis when Jaden Schwartz dealt with a similar injury. It might have been a little more significant. He had to get the surgery on it, but to what Robert Thomas is dealing with right now. Do you remember what that was like at the time as your team tried to navigate losing Jaden Schwartz for such a significant period of time?
Well, I think anytime you lose a player that's high up in your lineup, there's adjustments all over the place, and it's not one person that can replace him. And Thomas is similar to Schwartzy, and in that Schwartzy played both ends. He played power play, killed penalties. He played on the top line, and so there has to be a shared responsibility. So people are going to have to take pieces of what Robert does, because Robert was active in every aspect of the team. So it's not one person that's going to be able to take that ice and cover it. I think there's a real challenge on the right face-off dot, and that's why Sonny coming in is going to help take draws on that side, because Thomas was exceptional, almost 80% on that side of the ice taking face-off. So that's going to be, that's going to be a major challenge. But it's going to have to be people taking pieces out of what Robert did, and then hopefully surviving.
And Hitch, when you lose a player like Robert Thomas, as a coach, do you have to change the identity of your team when that kind of injury happens?
No, that's probably the biggest mistake you make, is change the identity. It isn't forever. It's basically 6 to 8 weeks probably, and you're going to have to learn to live without it, and you're going to have to get in a rhythm without it. I think it's understanding that there's a group of players, probably 5 or 6, that have to step up now to take that ice time that Robert was taking.
Hitch, you mentioned the face-offs, and that's obviously a huge area where Thomas was a big help for this team. Is there anything in particular beyond that you think, hey, this is what you're going to be watching for to see kind of how they mask over the loss of Robert Thomas in one aspect of what he brought to the table?
Well, I think the other aspect is on the power play. He was a quarterback, and he ran the power play from the flanker position. And, some guys run it from the top. Some teams run it from the top. Some run it from the flanker. And the Blues run their power play from the flanker position on the wall, and Robert was the guy that ran it. So you're not only going to have to replace that player, but you're going to have to switch sides of the ice, because anybody that's coming in is going to be a left shot. So it's going to have to run from the other side of the ice. So there's going to be a couple of games here where there might be a continuity problem. But I think in the next 2 or 3 games they can recover and get back into the swing of it.
Hitch, I'm curious, when you have a player like Thomas that goes out, a guy that you mentioned as top line center for the St. Louis Blues, then you kind of start to almost kind of have to refigure your lines out, see if you can find chemistry by changing things up a little bit. How long do you go as a coach when you change up those lines for the first time, balance give them time to figure out their chemistry before you have to try and juggle it back up again?
To be honest with you guys, I believe that chemistry is instant, or it's not there. And if it's not there, you better move quickly on to another aspect. I think waiting for chemistry, I've always felt it's been a mistake. And usually when it's not there, it doesn't get there. So if you see something you like, stay with it. If you see something you don't like, then change quick. And I think that's the attitude you got to have.
That's interesting, Hitch. And when you have players, how do they respond to that in your experience? Because I would imagine it's probably different for everybody, but are there some that push back on that a bit and say, hey, we're going to develop chemistry over time, just leave this be?
Yeah, I think there's I think at the end of the day, hockey is a game of twosomes, not threesomes. So having put it in a line together and saying, well, this is going to be a line forever is unrealistic. But getting 2 guys to work together is really important. And that's why you can keep the twosome and change the third guy out and not lose much impact on it. But like I said before, if it's not working, you're better off changing right away.
We're talking to Ken Hitchcock, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues head coach. He's joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Hitch, we've seen Braden Shin over the course of his career. He's played up and down the Blues lineup. He's played center. He's played wing. He's done a little bit of everything for this team. He's their captain. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's now going to be asked to be that top-line center for the foreseeable future. I don't know how much of him you've been able to see this season, but how do you think he'll be able to fit into that specific spot in the lineup?
I don't think he's going to be the top line center. I think this is going to be three balanced lines. As long as Buchnevich plays center ice, you got three capable centers, and you can really balance it out. Radek has played that three-hole his whole life, so he's going to be able to take on added responsibility. I look at it from having the three guys cover over what Thomas needs, not having one guy step up.
Hitch, I'm curious, if you've seen Philip Broberg's game, what have you made of him here in his first 7 games as a St. Louis Blue?
Just outstanding. Both him and Holloway have added so much to the group. All the guys that Army brought in have added so much to this team right now. The speed, size, tenacity. These guys have really helped us. And Broberg looks like he has a chance to be a star.
You've been around this game forever, Hitch. Does he remind you of anybody, like aspects of his game? Can you pull from your memory bank a guy that at this age, this good, that size, that speed? Does he remind you of anybody from your past?
Yeah, Jay Bouwmeester.
Can you expand on that a little bit? What specifically his aspects of his game remind you of Bo?
Bo is a complete player, and it looks like Broberg has a chance to be that complete player also. So every aspect of their game is solid. There's no weakness. And so you can build long minutes. They look like they can play forever, and Broberg's like that, and that's the way Jay was.
Did you think he was going to be this good, this quick, Hitch? Did you think that he was going to be able to just immediately insert himself into the lineup, into the top 4, and play this way, Broberg?
I watched him play a lot with Edmonton in the playoffs last year, and I didn't think there was any question he was going to be this good.
And Hitch, what's the impact of having a top-line defenseman like a Philip Broberg, like a Colton Parayko when you have them on your team?
Well, it's like gold because you're getting guys that play 25-plus minutes and almost air-free. It's like gold, to be honest with you guys.
Hitch, we appreciate the time today. Thank you so much for hopping on with us, giving us a little bit of insight into how, as a coach, you deal with losing a player like a Robert Thomas for an extended period of time. We always enjoy these conversations. All the best to you, man. We'll talk with you again soon.
All right, you guys take care.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
That's Ken Hitchcock, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues head coach, joining us here on BK and Ferrario. It's always great to be able to catch up with Hitch here on the show. If you missed any of that conversation, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
You like how he just immediately threw out there, Jay Bouwmeester.
I know you did.
I got a lot of crap for that comparison when I first made it. Now, when Ken Hitchcock, who coached Jay Bouwmeester here, says, like, with zero hesitation, Broberg is Bouwmeester, that makes me feel pretty good about it. Not going to lie to you. Not just because I said it, but because, dude, if that's what he is, if he becomes anything similar to Jay Bouwmeester, he's right. It's like gold. That's what it becomes for the St. Louis Blues. And he's worth that weight in gold. And whatever he ends up getting on his next contract will be worth it. It's going to be an unbelievable deal for Army. I can't believe he pulled that off.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I mean, Hitch was right. I mean, they just go out there and eat up like the 20, 25 minutes a night that you need, and they're sound defensively. And I think the thing that's more intriguing with Broberg to me is I feel like there's more upside offensively than what Bouwmeester had. And I remember kind of just the back end of Jay Bouwmeester when he was here in St. Louis. He was more that stay-at-home guy. I think you can see more of the upside with Philip Broberg as he continues to grow in his game to be the guy that gets up in the rush. And if you end up being the one that pair him with Colton Parayko, I said it all along. I thought finding the pairing mate with Colton Parayko, and I know he's not there yet. He's playing with Justin Falk.
Sure.
But I felt like that was kind of okay, once you find that, you've got that shutdown defensive pairing, that feels like when you could start to exit the retool.
The ironic part is Bouwmeester started out like this.
Yeah.
Early in Bouwmeester's career, he was an offensive factor. He had 12, 15, and 15 goals when he was 23, 24, and 25 years old playing for Florida. Then he went to Calgary, became more of a stay-at-home defenseman, and that's ultimately what he was whenever he was here in St. Louis as well. But early on in his career, he was a guy that was very much an offensive contributor, and then he changed his role to fit what teams needed and ultimately to become a champion.
Yeah, he was a top 3 pick back in 2003, and you think about the way those early 2000s Panthers teams played, that dictated exactly how the development actually went. Now, he played 82 games in his rookie season all the way back then, so we went through the growing pains on the fly, whereas now, hey, guess what, St. Louis, you're inheriting a guy who appears NHL ready-made, tailor-made for stardom already.
All right, to finish off this segment, I do want to get back to what he said about Thomas and how they're going to be able to replace him, if they're going to be able to replace him. I found it interesting, and he probably has the right perspective on this, certainly better than I would, about how, hey, there's really not a top line right now. You have 3 lines that are going to roll out there evenly, and depending on the situation, you'll put a different line out there. I would imagine Shin will be your quote-unquote shutdown line right now. That's my assumption, at least. Booch, Kyrou, and Texty is very much we are starting this line exclusively in the offensive zone.
What? What gave that away?
And then Holloway, Kapanen, and Joseph, I'm guessing they hope that line becomes what the Shin line previously was when you had Holloway, Shin, and Joseph together. I don't know if it can work. I'm super intrigued to see it, man. I just want to see how they can adjust to this, because he's right. You're going to need... It's like, I keep going back to this comparison, it's like when they lost Petro. You needed like 5 different players to add a specific piece of what he brought to the table. And now you're going to need a bunch of different dudes to contribute in different ways to what Thomas previously brought to the table. If you could go 500 over the next 6 weeks, I think that is considered to be a success without Robert Thomas.
I'd agree.
It's not going to be an easy thing for them to be able to do. Again, if you missed anything from our conversation, Ken Hitchcock, Hockey Hall of Famer, former Blues head coach, added some insight into how this team can overcome the loss of Robert Thomas for the next 6+ weeks. That is available for you after the show today on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It is all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Coming up next is T-Bone's favorite time of the week. It's time to play Believe It or Not. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Believe It or Not is next here on 101 ESPN.
The Blues season is in full swing, and you can tune in this Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. to hear BK and Ferrario live from the ENB Granite Studio at the Centene Community Ice Center.
Brought to you by Bud Light for the fans on game day, and by ENB Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Hey, it's BK, and it is time to unlock your inner champion, and the place to do so is at Victory Men's Health. You can check them out today, victorymenshealth.com. Write that website down, victorymenshealth.com. That is the place where you can learn about how they can unlock your inner champion. And if you do so, you go over there, click on Book Now, top right corner of the tab, put in your name, email, phone number, tell them a little bit about yourself, what you're trying to accomplish, and tell them that BK sent you to Victory Men's Health. When you do that, they'll be able to tell you about all of their different programs that they've got available to you, whether that's weight loss, low testosterone, erectile dysfunction. Maybe you want to learn about their red light therapy, vitamin infusions. They can help you out with all of that over at Victory Men's Health. For me, unlocking my inner champion meant going over there, getting a lab draw kit, finding out where my levels were. I found out not low on testosterone. However, I did a micronutrient lab test as well, and they found out I'm super low. I'm vitamin deficient in a number of things, and they've been able to help me out with that. It helps out with a bunch of different aspects of my life, especially with my energy. It helps me out with my runs as well. So you can find out what it is for you. VictoryMen'sHealth.com. That's VictoryMen'sHealth.com. Unlock your inner champion today.
balloon party, BK and Ferrario, to the fast lane and more. If you missed anything on 101 ESPN today, get caught up with all the shows and 101 podcasts at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
Driven by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues meet Matthews and company up north. Good afternoon. I'm Bradford Bruns. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. 4+ hours from now on 101 ESPN, St. Louis faces a major challenge in Ontario. Sans Robert Thomas, the Note will battle Craig Berube's Maple Leafs, who feature all-world center Austin Matthews. STL's former coach joined BK and Ferrario yesterday, praising some of number 34's virtues.
The intensity he practices with and effort that he puts into practice every day is pretty incredible. And that's why he's such a special player. I mean, he has ability and he's talent and he's big, but it's the work he puts in that he wants to be better and he wants to get better all the time.
Programming reminder, Fastlane ends at 5 to make way for pregame. NFL Week 8 begins tonight with Minnesota visiting Los Angeles. Cooper Kupp suiting up. TJ Hawkinson remains questionable. MU Tigers stalwarts Brady Cook, Nate Noel, Mookie Cooper all listed as doubtful entering their mammoth tilt against Bama. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Boy, believe it or not, and Ken Hitchcock on the same day. This is probably his song right here.
Probably.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
free,
flying away on a wing and a bear.
Who could it be?
I couldn't
believe it or not, it's just me.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. Not our best effort. I couldn't get over.
I don't know about
Bradford going for it. I didn't have it in me.
Hey, if you're going to play ball, if you're filling in, you go for it, baby.
Seriously.
It's my bad. I got to be better.
Bradford even told you in the office today before the show, he's like, I am so fired up for Believe It or Not.
It's Thursday.
He wasn't kidding. He was not kidding.
And
all right.
I don't know what that was.
No, that was bad. It was a bad job by me.
You were more focused on flying like a freaking bird again.
I was a little pitchy, though, too.
Somebody on the YouTube chat said, who's the guy in the back of the studio right now? That was Mike Ryder.
Yeah.
You don't see him very often. He doesn't like being on camera, but Mike Ryder was caught on camera just briefly.
He likes to go into hiding.
It's like one of those cameos in a movie with like a super famous movie star that you don't even realize is there until you're like, wait, is that Tom Hanks?
And then you find out like a month later when you watch like a video on YouTube.
Yeah. So that's what you just saw. All right. Believe it or not, guys, tonight is the last stand for the Rams, and if they lose this, you will see Cooper Kupp traded next week.
I'm going to believe it because they are acting like this is like the game that determines if they're in the playoffs or not tonight. They activated Puka Nakua's 21-day, whatever it is, practice designation for him to come off of IR like on Tuesday. It's like, oh, okay, he'll be back in 2 weeks. And then I saw a report today, and it's like, hey, Puka could play tonight. Okay, well, that tells me that they're probably Sean McVay's like, no, I'm going to prove I can win with this offense still. I'm going to believe this. I think Sean McVay knows if he loses this game, he's probably losing Cooper Kupp. So I think there's a chance of that.
I will believe it as well. However, if the Rams are going to prevail tonight, I think it will be on the strength of Kyren Williams, giving him that steady diet of handoffs. I do believe you can run on Minnesota in that setting there. And Cooper Kupp certainly mix him in accordingly. But Williams has been the bell cow so far this season. It's kind of surprised me a little bit, Tanner, that he's received that many reps and he's held up so far. But go with what's working. Continue to roll.
I think this is their last stand, and I'm not sure that I buy that they can get it done, man. The defense is a problem for them. I think Darnold's going to have a big night tonight against that lack of pass rush by the LA Rams. I think you see the Vikings win by 2 scores. And I think next week you see Cooper Kupp potentially on the move. I don't know where he's going to go. I saw a report today that the Steelers are interested in him. That makes sense for them. I could see the Cowboys getting interested in something like this if they're willing to spend the money. That's an open-ended question. Who knows with Jerry Jones? He makes sense for a lot of different teams. I just don't know where he ends up going. But yeah, I believe it. I think that he will be traded by this year's deadline, and I do think tonight is their last stand. T-Bone, what do you got for us?
Guys, believe it or not, we will see both Illinois and Mizzou cover the spread this weekend. Mizzou 17-point dog as things stand. Illinois 21.5-point dog.
I do not think Illinois. I do not think that Illinois will cover. Mizzou, I don't know, man. So much of that depends on Brady Cook. If you told me Brady Cook will play the entire game, I would take Mizzou plus the points. I don't know if I believe that, though. And if Drew Pine comes in the second half, I do not think they will cover the spread. So I'll say I'm not believing it, and that ultimately both of them end up losing straight up and against the spread.
Forget it. Sorry, Tanner, on the Illini front. I'm serious. This feels like a game in which Gabriel goes nuts. And while I like what Illinois did on the ground last weekend versus Michigan, who would have thought, honestly, raise your hand if you thought Illinois would have posted 100-ish rushing yards, and you almost go, okay, stupid question. They're 200. Yet Oregon just feels as if it's going to be off to the races from the jump in this one. Whereas with Mizzou at last check, now it's up to 17.5. Bama favored by 17.5-ish. I'm going to say, hey, that Cook logs enough game action to be able to keep it, we can't say relatively close, but it's a game for a half or so, then all bets are off. But I think Mizzou can stay within 2 touchdowns.
I have a real worry about what Ryan Williams is about to do to these Mizzou corners.
Yeah.
Ooh. It's not going to be good. He's going to, bold prediction here, not so bold, honestly. He's going to have at least one 70-yard touchdown in this game.
I like that.
Yeah.
I am not going to believe this because I don't think Mizzou's the team that covers.
That's fair.
I'm not sure Cook's holding up throughout that game, and if he's not, and if they get down early, they're really going to have to start throwing the ball, which puts them in more danger as well. And to your point, I mean, there could be big plays coming from the Alabama offense. I think Illinois, I think they lose. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say they're going to win. I think they can cover a 21-point spread. I mean, they lost by 14 to Penn State, who I think is in the same kind of tier as Oregon, as some of the top teams in the country.
That's where I would disagree. I think Oregon is a tier above them. I think Oregon is the best team in the country right now, in my opinion. I think their interior of the defensive line is amazing. I think their offense is really good. It just depends on if they get pushed. That's where I don't know on Illinois. Can they push Oregon to keep trying to score? I would say probably not. And that's where the line is really big, man. 21 points is a ton.
They're going to need a career game from Luke Altmaier.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, the NBA season has started in earnest, as it usually does here in St. Louis. But on Tuesday, we saw the Lakers take down one of the heavyweights out west in Minnesota. Forget the LeBron-Bronny quote-unquote circus for now. Bet it or forget it, or believe it or not for that matter, J.J. Redick will empower Anthony Davis and actually run the offense through him, and L.A. reaches 50 victories.
They're going to have to. They're going to have to empower Anthony Davis because LeBron, we know where he's at, dude. He's
old.
He's 100 years old. You're not going to be able to continue to lean on him during the regular season the way they have over the past few years. But I don't think that AD is capable of it. I think AD is the kind of guy that you can run your offense through occasionally. I don't think he is an 82-game, run your offense through him. He can score you 30 a night. I think he's like a 20 to 25 points per game type of a player. So they're going to need to get it from somebody else. Maybe Austin Reeves can be that guy occasionally when you don't have it from Anthony Davis. I don't know. I'm not sure they have the offense to be able to do that. So I'm not believing this. I don't think that they're going to be a team that ends up with 50-plus wins, and I do not think that they can run the offense every single night through Anthony Davis.
When Anthony Davis isn't the guy, somebody else who should be that third wheel, that third scoring option, it needs to be a D'Angelo Russell. But he is so unpredictable that you almost are leaning on Reeves being more that consistent force. LeBron mentioned this 2 years ago for AD to essentially take the baton, and it never happened. I wonder, post-Olympics, on the heels of what, quite honestly, he was as good as Sterling as anybody on the defense end for all of last season, but will you see that nightly demanding the ball in the post? I don't know.
No. AD hadn't proven to be that guy yet in his career, and he's not going to change. Yeah. I'm not going to believe this. I think they're going to be a team that plays in the play-in again, and not as the 9 or 10 seed, but probably where they were last year, where they were the 7, I think it was. So I'm not going to believe this. I just can't see AD being that guy that takes the torch from
Also,
LeBron.
the West is ridiculous, dude.
I think he was with the Pelicans, though, and then he started deferring more when he went to L.A. He was that guy.
I think because he had to be that guy, And at that point, he was also younger and healthier. And at this point, he's kind of beat up in his career.
Yeah. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are believing it or not. Somebody from the 314 says, believe it or not, guys, the Blues will get at least 5 points on their road trip. They will win at least 2 games in regulation and 1 in overtime on this 4-game road trip.
Let's see. I'll believe it.
Got the Maple Leafs tonight. You've got Montreal, Ottawa, and Philly.
Those are the 3 games where you got to do it. I think Toronto is a very tough task for a Thomas-less Blues team. But Montreal, Ottawa, Philadelphia, you should be able to have enough defensive suppression to keep yourself in all 3 of those games to where I can see where they can win 2 of them and even get a point in a loss in overtime. So I'll believe it. I think they can do it.
Begrudgingly, I'm going to forget it because I look at these other squads and I say that at least 3 of these 4 foes are very strong up the middle. So it's going to be that immediate litmus test for Braden, Shin, and company. It's going to be extremely tough to win on both sides of the ice. I don't know if I see it here.
Believe it or not, the Dodgers will win the World Series in 6 games or less. I do not believe, by the way, that the Blues will go 2-1-1 or better. I do not believe that. I think it's going to be really hard.
Like I said that after you listen to the next Believe
it or not, Dodgers win the World Series in 6 games or fewer.
I'll say believe it. I think these are going to be some offensive slugfest. I don't know if the pitching is going to do very well in this series. I think the Dodgers have the better team, and I think they will win it probably in 6 games.
That's where I'm at.
I'll buy it as well because I like what I have seen from some of the lower-level Los Angeles relievers in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. I trust that group, that relief core, even beyond Kopech more than the Yankees possess. And when you get into those tighter innings, they've demonstrated enough to me in the way that Roberts has actually managed that bullpen. I like those crucial outs to be recorded more by L.A. than New York, yeah.
All right, last one here. Believe it or not, if the Cardinals implement the model that the Tampa Bay Rays or Cleveland Guardians have, they will not lock up any of their future stars and will not spend for stars in free agency. I'm not going to believe this. This is why I don't think that I buy they're going to follow one specific model. I think they're going to have their own model, right? They're going to incorporate pieces of, hey, Tampa Bay, really good at developing pitching. We want that. Let's use that. Hey, Cleveland, really good at developing solid players. The Cardinals have been pretty good at that as well, but hey, let's take some of the stuff that they were doing, especially when it comes to their pitching development. All right, cool. We'll incorporate that. And I think that they're going to add a little bit of their own spices and seasonings to this concoction, and it'll be what the Cardinals do, the soda, quote-unquote, Cardinal way, so to speak, right? I think they will continue to pay for stars. That is something that has been a consistent theme for them for the last 25 years. When the Cardinals are at their best, they have a superstar on the roster. Most of the time, it's a guy that came from outside of the organization. So I'm not going to believe this. I do think they'll continue to pay for their guys. And if they've got somebody internally, like if Jordan Walker becomes a superstar, they'll pay him.
Yeah. I'm not going to believe it either. I think people... And it's easy. I get how you can get to the conclusion of, oh, Chaim Bloom wants to go back to the Rays model. He saw the failure in Boston of what he tried to do. I think what this all was two things. One, of course, the RSN situation makes them to where they just have no idea what their revenues are going to be. And I think, two, they just wanted to clean the books up for Chaim Bloom. I think they didn't want Chaim Bloom to be stuck with some old contracts and be where Mo has gotten, which is Mo got stuck with the roster. He didn't know where to go because he was hoping that young core would come up and develop with it. That didn't really end up happening. He didn't have the pitching pipeline to come up and develop and help him out as well. So what he had to do, he had to go to free agency to just patchwork this all together, and that's where you end up where they were kind of stuck in the middle. I think they wanted to reset everything. So when Chaim Bloom took over next year, he's got a clean slate for the most part, and then he can build a team the way he wants to build them.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today. He'll be back in tomorrow. He will also be in this evening for pregame coverage. Blues versus the Maple Leafs starts at 5 o'clock with Alex Puck Drop for that with Joey and Curbs right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN tonight at 6. Coming up next, we're going to hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN.
Take the fast lane home weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Gary Davis on 101 ESPN. 2 former pros and 1 average Joe. The fast lane is driven by Scrap Mart Metals Recycling. Show off your football knowledge and see if you can top the Fast Lane and the dudes from the Rizzuto Show on the point. For this week's top score, it's the Fast Lane and the Riz Show throwing down all football season long in the Pick'em Challenge. Enter your picks for this week right now at 101ESPN.com.
Refreshed by Bud Light, official beer sponsor of the NFL. Easy to Sunday, easy to enjoy.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with the Daily Rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
All right, let's get into the rewind here. We started out the show talking about Brady Cook, the report that he is unlikely to play on Saturday. I think it's a bunch of hogwash. I do not believe that at all. The line seems to indicate that people do believe that report. Alabama has bumped to a 17.5-point favorite in some places. Mizzou on the road this weekend. I don't think Missouri's winning this game. I do think Alabama will ultimately win. I think Brady Cook's playing. I think he's starting. I don't know if he's going to finish the game, though. I think you would have to literally remove his ankle from his body for him not to participate in a game against Alabama on the road to keep Mizzou potentially in the college football playoff race. He did everything he possibly could to get back out there on the field on Saturday. So I don't buy it. I think there's even a chance that Nate Noel plays this weekend. That one, I don't know. It's a foot injury. You never know with that stuff. But Brady Cook, I'd be shocked if he doesn't play on Saturday.
Yeah, I would be shocked if he doesn't play as well. I think you're seeing the gamesmanship from the Missouri side where it is, oh, yeah, he hasn't been practicing. All the reports that we'll be seeing. I mean, Drink's closing off media from seeing their practices. I wonder why that is. So I think he's going to play. I'm 100% with you. Brady Cook's a gamer, man. He's going to go out there. He's going to give it all he has. And you're probably right. He probably would have to lose that leg for him to not be out there.
All right, the Blues back in action this evening. They're taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jamie Rivers, I see his beautiful shining face is up there on the Zoom link right now. He's going to be joining the Fast Lane here in just about 5 minutes or so. Blues versus Toronto tonight. Blues a significant dog in this one in Vegas. It's basically 2-1 on the money line if you want to bet on the Blues in this one. T-Bone, what are you looking for? What is the number one thing you're watching for this game without Robert Thomas on the ice for the Blues?
Well, I'll be curious. Hitch mentioned when we talked with him, Ken Hitchcock, the former Blues head coach, that he thinks there's no real top line. But I am curious to know, what line does take on the role of being the shutdown line tonight, especially going against Toronto. I think you're right. You said earlier, I think it's going to be that Chen line, and we'll see if he's able to be ready for this task. This is not an easy task going up against the Toronto Maple Leafs and Austin Matthews. That's the number one thing that I'm going to be watching for tonight.
Can you steal this one? Can you play a goal suppression game against a team that relies heavily on goal scoring and has some of the best goal scorers in the NHL? If you can do that against the Maple Leafs, I'll have a little more confidence moving forward that you can do it against the better teams on your schedule without Robert Thomas in there. Final thing, Vikings versus Rams, Thursday Night Football. I've got the Vikings in this one. I think they can potentially win it by 2 scores. T-Bone, who you got?
Oh, I got the Rams. I think with Kupp coming back, they're going to win this one. I actually like the under in the game, by the way, 47.5. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a defensive, bad offensive bout than anything else.
He's T-Bone. That is Bradford Bruns, who did a fantastic job today. Alex out. He'll be back in tomorrow with us. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you missed anything, check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Fast Lane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN's Blues Fan of the Week.
Congratulations to Kevin Nettesheim of Fenton, Missouri. You are this week's 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week.
Submit your pick now to be the next 101 ESPN Blues Fan of the Week and take home a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues game. Learn more at 101ESPN.com.